We pray that you would open our eyes to see your hand at work in every aspect of this meeting, and may your Spirit guide us in making wise decisions and lead us toward the best outcomes. Amen.
Thank you. All right, good. Roll call, please. Thank you.
Chairman Albert,
Here.
Mrs. Dalville,
Here.
Mr. John. Senator Fessy, Senator Connick, Mr. Matthews,
Here.
Ms. Ferry,
Here.
Mr. Cochran,
Here.
Mr. Broom,
Here.
Mr. O'Neill.
Here.
Yep.
Thank you, Ingrid. Approval of agenda. Have a motion. Angela. Second, Ms. Tucker. Discussion, any objection? All right, moving on. Approval of minutes. Okay, Mr. Armstrong, a motion. All right. Second, Captain Bob. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Let's see. Okay, old business. Any discussion? Old business? Anyone? All right. No announcements? All right, moving on. All right, Glenn, looks like we're going to get to you here. Glenn Leday Jr. is going to go over 2024 year in review and the 2026 draft annual plan and CBRA look ahead. Glenn.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Alfred and members of the commission. Appreciate the time today. What we're going to do a snapshot of 2024, really a snapshot of a lot of the presentations that have been given to the board over the past year. Touch on some of the key aspects of that, and then look at obviously the federal efforts that we've got going on, and really touch towards what can come over the next 12 months. And so I know some of these things a lot of you have seen at our board meetings, but want to revisit that just to show you the amount of progress that's taken place at CBRA and really across the coast of Louisiana over the last year. So with that, I'll jump right in. And so just to start off on that 2024 year in review. And so I wanted to revisit this slide. This is something that we show at the end of each year, the 2024 year by the numbers. And so just to kind of showcase the amount of work that took place in this last year, the first piece of that is the new construction starts. And so as you've seen in our annual plans, really committed to trying to deliver these great projects on protection and restoration to the citizens of Louisiana. We had 12 new starts in Louisiana, over $3 billion in value when you include the Southwest Coastal Project, that includes the non-structural and the ecosystem restoration components. So just a massive amount of work there. You'll see some of the other groundbreakings like Agency Lock Phase 2 and the Maurepas diversion all feed into that number. And so with that, we had almost 12,000, over 11,000 acres of wetlands that were benefited, almost 3,000 directly created by dredging work. And that amounts to over 14.5 billion cubic yards of sediment that was pumped in that 2024 year, which is obviously over 1 million per month. So really a massive amount of work that's going on. We had 15 projects that were actually completed. We'll touch on a couple of those that had over $200 million in total value, and then 10.4 miles of levee improved. So just continuing the work that we've been doing for the last decade, and as you've seen in the annual plans and you'll see in the work that we're doing, that continues to ramp up. And so with that, we'll touch on a variety of the activities that took place over this last month. You can see here, this is that year in review. That's part of our annual plan. I want to touch on a few of those before we jump into the slides. A obviously a new administration took office. Thankful for the governor for appointing us to this. We're excited to serve. You can see there right away in March, we received 2 of the largest restore grants ever awarded, that being the river introduction to Maurepas Swamp and the agency lot complex phase 2. And so excited about those awards. So that got really everything kick-started. And then with that, we had a great industry day as well as the largest shores fly-in in Washington, D.C. in the summer of that year in June. But with that, as you see in that picture, we were able to meet with the Corps on the Corps' mega study, LMR-COM, Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Management Study, and talk about old river control. We were able to break ground on a number of projects we'll go through today. And then finally, in November and December of last year, we were able to pass the constitutional amendment that dedicated all energy production revenues in the Gulf of America now for our coastal restoration. And then finally, the passage of the 2024 WRDA bill that we covered. So really an exciting year. Thankful to Representative Bourgeron for authoring that bill that allowed that constitutional amendment to pass. And thanks for all of you for your support to get that passed. So an exciting year, and we'll cover some of these highlights. And so the first is just to touch on a couple of the completed projects. And I want to highlight the variety of different projects that we're building. The first of which is the Sycamore Point State Park improvements. And you can see the amount of work that went on there. Really just want to highlight, one is building projects across the coast here in Iberia, St. Mary Parish. This is a recreational use project where we're improving a very large state park at Sycamore Point. You can see the beach nourishment work that went on, the road improvements, the 22 pull-through RV sites, the rock revetment work that went on at Quintana Canal, and then all of the additional work like the 1,700 linear feet of marsh boardwalk that's built there. And so it's exciting to see this. You'll see in our annual plan and the work that we're doing, additional refuse projects like the Iberville boat launch that's part of our Tapwide Basin program. And so really committed to getting the citizens of the great state of Louisiana out into our coastal marshes and estuaries. In addition to that, we've got the completion of our freshwater bayou shoreline protection project that was completed early in 2024. This is highlighting really the other program that we have, which is parish matching. And so we're excited to partner with Pavilion Parish on this and see that work done on a shoreline protection type project. Almost 2 miles of shoreline protection that was done at Freshwater Bayou. We had our 2025 announcement for parish matching at the last board meeting. So excited to see that program continue, and you'll see that funding that's dedicated in our 2026 annual plan for the continuation of that program. And then in addition to that, we had in the fall of last year, late fall, we had the completion of our Long Point Bayou Marsh Creation Project. And so that was a unique project. We were able to partner with the Corps of Engineers on beneficial use dredging, but also utilize dollars from LOSCO and NRD on the Sitco settlement. And so just looking at ways to use alternative revenues like that, to partner with the Corps, and then really leverage that work and build bigger and better projects. So that project was completed in the fall of last year. We've got some additional work that will take place over the next 3 years, like dike gapping and other things in that first segment of O&M. So that was a very large project where we were able to dredge material from the Calcasieu Ship Channel and build that marsh there on the western side of Cameron Parish. And then finally, wanted to highlight the completion of the La Branch East Marsh Creation Project. This is one of the largest projects completed in the corporate program on the marsh creation side, led by NRCS. Of course, we're the non-federal sponsor on this program, but that's a project. Almost 1,500 acres of marsh are built there on the Lake Pontchartrain shoreline in St. Charles Parish. So a massive project completed at the very end of last year. And so with this, you can kind of see the highlights of the variety of projects that we're building, and then the size, the complexity, and the different types of programs we're using to leverage all of these dollars. I just wanted to touch on those. Those are some of the key highlights that we showed to the CPRA board over this last year. And then obviously we've got a lot in the works, so wanted to highlight that as we jumpstart this year in this Governor's Advisory Commission. So the first of which is, of course, our Our master plan, that work really never stops. So you can see from this chart, just the continuation of that after the passing of the 2023 master plan really jump-started this. As we took office, immediately led into those community conversations to really kick this off to get the 2029 master plan started. And so you can see that there at where we are in year 2. Exciting work that's going on in that advisory group engagement. I know a number of you are part of that, whether it's the CAT or the regional work groups. We're really excited for the support and the technical guidance that you give for this. As we kind of roll into 2025, you see kind of one of the key aspects is on the bottom side is that modeling data updates that we're doing right now, but also in the next several months, opening the public new project development process, public workshops, to get feedback from the public for new projects as we start evaluating those for the 2029 plan. So that's kind of that key part that will take place in year 3, which is the summer of 25 through the summer of 2026. And so you'll see those notices start to go out. Our master plan team will work hard on that. And then obviously that'll lead us through the model runs and plan formulation, and then eventually those future community conversations to start developing the details of that plan. So exciting work. And then you see there, kind of kickstarting now is the document development work where we develop the draft and final plan. So there's obviously a lot of details that go into this, but just want to highlight this and touch on the fact that, we'll be kickstarting that new project development process here soon. Another thing that we talked a lot over this last year, and obviously we'll continue to do that, is finding future funding for the program. And so looking over this next decade, what that looks like. One of the key initiatives that we're working with the Water Institute on is the coastal carbon research and development work, and that's that carbon crediting to find ways to get creative revenue from the work that we do, building marshes, the amount of carbon sequestration that is done through all of our restoration efforts. And so Water Institute is working with CPRA, really leading this. Ryan Lazina and Bo Jones presented last year to the CPRA board. And so we'll be continuing that work, and they'll be presenting updates throughout that process. We're really trying to highlight just the different types of work that we'll be doing to find funding to really build this program and continue that process. Obviously, we'll touch on advocacy in DC for offshore revenue, but really we just want to highlight the different things that the program is looking for alternative revenues in the future. And then really, as we kind of finish up this section, really want to highlight just some of the massive projects we talk a lot about. You can see the snapshot here. Lake Warren Marsh Creation, really the largest marsh creation project in the agency in the state's history at over 3,100 acres. That's continuing, and hope to finish that in the next 12 months. Great progress going on there. 4 of the cells are already completed and working on the other 3. You have a total of 8 marsh creation cells there, but just that massive work on the Lake Warren Rim in St. Bernard Parish. We've got the Chandelier Island Restoration Project that's in engineering design. Construction will be kicking off soon, helping to secure funding for that program through a variety of sources like NIFWIP and NERDA. And then, of course, the Grand Isle Beach and Dune restoration work that the Corps of Engineers is leading for those Hurricane Ida repairs. And so that's a massive effort, $122 million for dune repairs, dune rebuilding, beach nourishment, segmented breakwater work, and then an additional $40 to $60 million on new breakwaters that we are helping work with the Corps on through their PIR and FCC&E process. And so just a massive amount of work that's going on there in the beach and dune and shoreline processing in Grand Isle. And so just a snapshot you can see there, with Chandelier, it would be the largest barrier island project in the agency's history. And then Lake Bowen, the largest marsh creation project, massive work, and probably the most work that's ever gone on in Grand Isle when you include the back levee work that will be taking place through this FY26 process. So a lot of ongoing work there. And then finally, just great progress at the Nichols Coastal Center. That building is almost complete. Ribbon cutting will be coming later this year. A lot of our partners here and in Thibodaux will be moving into that building. And so just really excited to see that being completed. The Governor's Office of Coastal Activities will have an office here, as well as the Thibodeau Regional Office will be moving into that facility. So really excited. I know a lot of you here have done a lot of work to get this moving and get this funded. So appreciate everything that y'all have done to do that. Excited to see that come to completion. And then with that, just touching on all the great groundbreakings that took place last year on some of the really largest projects in the agency's history. You have the phase 2 construction of the Homeland Navigation Canal Lock Complex took place in August of last year. That's the largest feature of really the very large Mark-Anson to the Gulf system. You have the first federal component, levee component in the Mark-Anson to the Gulf system. That's Reach 8. That groundbreaking took place in October of last year. You had the first non-structural groundbreaking for Southwest Coastal. That's the first home elevation that's taking place in Lake Charles for the non-structural work that's part of that Southwest Coastal Federal Program. And then finally, you had the river introduction into Maurepas Swamp. Long time coming. That's obviously the diversion there at Maurepas, which is also mitigation for the West Shore Lake Monitoring Project, as well as working time credits. So just a number of obviously different large-scale projects kicking off. Some of these things, the first of its kind. The precedent set here hopefully can be used for other projects like Upper Barataria. So exciting to see all that take place and get moving. And so with all of those, that's a massive amount of funding. And so some of those dollars that were allocated in FY25, you will see really get spent between river introduction and Maurepas Swamp, agency lock, that's almost $800 billion, almost $1 billion in just those two projects alone, plus the number of non-structural projects in Southwest Coastal is in the billions. So really massive and exciting to see all of that work really kick off all in the fall and winter of last year. And so with that, we wanted to really just touch on a look ahead of what you can see not only in our draft fiscal year 2026 plan, but some of the work that we just kicked off that was funded through FY25. And so the first is really a large collaboration that I know Tommy will talk about later. I won't go into the details, but a large amount of work that will be going on at White Lake. We had a really good site visit last week on that, and then really a large restoration effort that was going on in Marsh Island. So you saw that was funded in FY25, key priority for this administration, and so that's kicking off, and excited to see that work that's being done there. I'll let Tommy touch on a lot of that work in his presentation. Another real investment that you'll see obviously continue, but hopefully accelerate and emphasize is collaboration with the Ports and Waterways Investment Commission. We'll hopefully hear from them later this year at the CPRA board meeting. But CPRA got to serve on two of the task force that are part of that commission. First is resiliency of coastal ports, and so this is just a snapshot of the work that we'll be doing with Port of Fourchon to help provide resiliency, restoration, and protection for that critical port. But that restoration of the headland there, the repairs that will be ongoing there, plus the repairs and additions to those breakwater systems there at the port will all be part of this renewed focus. And then in addition to that, working with the navigation task force to find ways to continue to really expand beneficial use of dredge material. So how can we continue to work with the Corps or do state work where we're dredging material that needs to be dredged for navigation beneficially used, similar to Long Point. And so you'll see a lot of that focus that we hopefully can continue to renew and progress. And so that'll be part of that collaboration with that investment commission. And then with that, I want to kind of transition a bit into just some of the look ahead and ongoing efforts on the federal side. So if any of you got to watch the CPRA board meeting last month, you saw Neil McMillan really give a good update on the state of the federal affairs here that's related to coastal. And so you can see that list of some of the presidential executive orders. The big mission, the big takeaway here is that renewed focus on domestic energy production, and then with that, the goal of trying to obviously get more revenue for coastal protection and restoration, utilizing GOMESA and the expansion of that to get more revenue for the coast. And so The thought there is through these executive orders that production will increase, and then working with our congressional delegation and advocacy avenue to kind of increase that. And then in addition to that, you saw Governor Landry, Chairman Alford, and myself, and Chairman Dove were present to sign the state's executive order to rename all documents to the Gulf of America. But with that came that stress to expand offshore energy production as well as revenues associated with that. And so excited to see that passed just a couple of weeks ago down in Houma, and then we'll be working with the delegation on that renewed focus. And so excited to see all of that take place just here in the last 2 months. And then in addition to that, one of the big things that we've been working on just in the last 12 months is project labor agreements. And so I had an opportunity through an invite from Congressman Higgins to testify to the House Oversight Committee last year to talk about President Biden's previous executive order on a mandate for PLAs and the impact that it had on our coastal program. And so we were happy to see on February 7th, the Department of Defense removed that PLA requirement. And so that PLA requirement was impacting some of our large federal projects like West Shore, because the Corps of Engineers was mandated to use PLAs over projects of $35 million. So that mandate has been removed. It's really great for the state because that will not lead to cost escalation and reduced bids on those large projects. So we're really excited to see that mandate was removed and the administration moved in that direction. And thankful for Congressman Higgins and the advocacy work that he did on that issue, as well as the rest of the delegation. So just a great highlight there. And then finally, just to touch on funding, as you saw from Neil McMillan's presentation, excited to see that the federal government was fully funded through FY25 through September 2025 through that continuing resolution. With that, the Corps did receive money through their work plan, but unfortunately with that, the earmarks need to be removed through that process. And so you see that list of earmarks there for our key federal projects in the state, and so we'll be working with the delegation, hopefully either funding that through work plan process for this year or getting those appropriations requested for the next fiscal year for FY26. And so you see those key appropriations. We're working right now with the delegation. We've got some of the first FY26 appropriation requests that are due at the end of this week. So we'll be getting those in, as well as working with the rest of the delegation on the remainder of those. But the key there is through that continuing resolution process, the earmarks are no longer part of that. So we'll be making that request for those in FY26 and through the course of FY25 work plan. And then finally, on the federal side, really updating you on WRDA. You probably saw, but through WRDA 2044, we had one of our most successful authorizations in the state's history. Kind of the biggest win there was the authorization of the largest project in the nation, which is the St. Tammany Flood Risk Management and Coastal Storm Risk Management Project, valued at over $5.9 billion. So that was a massive project there. You see that flag in the ground there, so that was fantastic. We had really a number of different studies that were funded, including the Lake Pontchartrain Storm Surge Reduction Project. That will be a federal feasibility study. You had a number of other things. For example, $50 million of the NOV efforts were dedicated to the Point Celeste Pump Station project. Really a great win for Plaquemines Parish. You've got a variety of provisions that are part of the HISRIS program that helped CPRA of the state. And then from Arkansas to the Gulf, you see that provision there. We were allowed to credit work that was done from 1989 onward. And so some of the work that we've done is part of that cost reduction work that was done through the ACAR process, but the other work can now be included in working time credit to buy down that 35% cost share. So that was a huge win, really exciting work there. We've got a variety of other things, working with the Corps on the LaRose to Gulf Meta system to get them back into what's known as the RIP program, or the Rehabilitation and Inspection Program. And we've got some other clarifying language. So our support from the delegation is key here. Really excited to see that. But really one of the the things that I've stressed over the last several months, and just want to highlight for the commission, is with all of this success in Word, you can see just the amount of federal work that's ongoing across the state, from the non-structural work that kicked off in Southwest, the future work in South Central. You've got potentially more non-structural there in Tangipahoa, St. Tammany, was not really part of the map, but also in Lafitte. And then you've got the various flood protection structural projects, Margansett, Gulf, Roseville, Bennett, NOV, WPD, LPD, et cetera, and then Upper Barrett as well. And so just a massive amount of work. One of the things that also came out of Word this year is Margansett to the Gulf will now be connected to Upper Barrett since that was previously authorized in 22. And so you'll really have full protection from Gibson all the way to St. Charles and St. John Parish around the lakefront, and then eventually in St. Tammany Parish, and then you've got the non-structural work in the other vicinities. And of course, with that, we have a variety of other massive federal feasibility studies that'll take place, like the Lake Pontchartrain storm risk reduction effort. You've got a saltwater study that'll be done in New Orleans. You've got Alexandria to the Gulf expansion, and then the Corps' Lower Mississippi River comprehensive analysis. So just a massive amount of work. Thankful for all of the efforts that have been done over the years. But with that, we've got that federal investment, usually on the construction side of 65%, and then that allows us to only come up with 20 towards the remaining 35%. So that really helps us offset those costs. So a lot of activity here that I'll be updating you on throughout this next year. And then finally, on the federal side is, now that Order 24 has been authorized, the public comment period on the implementation guidance is open. And so you can see those dates there for upcoming virtual listening sessions, and then submit those comments to the federal e-rulemaking portal by April 28th. So essentially, we have about a month to do that. Those virtual listening sessions are listed there on March 26th, April 2nd, and April 9th, or you can use this QR code. And so it's critical, if you've got feedback on the rulemaking and implementation guidance process, please get those to this portal by April 28th. And then finally, I've touched on some of these things, but the biggest there is really that Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Management Study. That will continue for the next several years. It's a 5-year study, and then there will likely be tiered studies that come off of that for a variety of efforts. CPRA is the formal non-federal sponsored state lead on that, as well as all of the other states that are part of that Lower Mississippi River system. So I know a lot of you are engaged in that process, and we'll continue to do that. We've got an upcoming meeting with the Chappaqua Basin Commission on March 31st to continue to update on that progress, but a lot to come there. And that you'll see the Corps come back and really update us here heavily over the next 12 to 24 months. So a lot will be going on there. And then finally, just touching on the annual plan process, I know that we've given a lot of presentations. We had really great attendance across the 4 meetings, the 3 in-person and the virtual, like Charles, Houma, and Jefferson across the state. As you see, almost 240 public comments. And so excited to be part of that. We've got our upcoming final draft that will be presented to the CPRA board on April 16th. And then with that approval, we would move into the submittal to the legislature and the work that we'll do through the House and Senate Natural Resources and Transportation Committees. So that will be going over the next 2 months. And just to touch on, what was in there, a variety of those projects that we just covered. Obviously, a lot of those funds carry forward, as well as the work that we'll be doing there that we've highlighted through those presentations. You can see there the FY26 total expenditures as the draft was estimated at $1.8 billion. That'll be slightly higher as we develop the final numbers. And when we look across the 3 years, it'll be roughly similar to what you see here, with probably an additional amount of money that's part of FY25 and 27 as we try to accelerate construction for those efforts. So we're excited to present that to the CPRA board in a few weeks. So with that, appreciate the time. I know it was a lengthy presentation, but wanted to give you a snapshot of everything that took place over this last year, and excited to update the commission as they have meetings quarterly So with that, feel free to answer any questions. Obviously, connect with us on social media and happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Representative Orgeron?
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ladie. Great presentation as always. First question is, being the only legislator that actually came today and being interested, I wanted to know, have y'all identified someone to carry the resolution this year for the annual plan?
Yes, we are working on that, and we'll identify that here in the next couple of days.
But
Yeah.
not ready to announce it yet?
Not yet, yeah.
All right. Number two,
I said, not you, Jim.
well, I was gonna deny you that anyway. As vice chair, it's best that I don't. But anyway, of the from the 3 in person, 4 with the 4th being virtual, the 239 public comments, has that been distilled down to a report on the comments space of what was the comments from the public?
Yeah, I mean, as you saw, Representative Orgeron, we had a lot of obviously good feedback on the mid-military version. A lot of feedback on projects like Central Wetlands and Mr. Go, where we're trying to kick that off before. Obviously each region, you've got individual projects. Obviously, Homa, where you're part of a lot of good support from our hands in the Gulf and the efforts there. In Southwest, a lot of really good support and encouragement on the work that we're doing on Cameron Shoreline, Rockefeller areas. In Jefferson, I mentioned Mr. Go, obviously the conversions, but that's just a summary of kind of what we did and then just the feedback we got.
Is there a way to get a report or account of what was the content for at least the legislators prior to the session start, and y'all been providing the annual? Y'all going to be presenting the plan very early
Yes.
on in the rapid session.
Sure, yeah, it's a smaller session this year, so we'll be doing that. But we have each of the comments, I believe, that we can provide to you, but,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, not necessarily wanting to see every one,
Okay,
just
yeah.
a coalescence
Provide
of what they
yes.
were, where the points of interest
Sure,
were.
yep.
And lastly, I know we probably should have mentioned it in announcements, but also working with Restore Retreat, planting mangroves next week on phase 2. I appreciate the slide on Blue Carbon and everything that we're doing in CPRA to advance that space there as well. Much appreciated. That's all the questions I got, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Orgeron.
Michael Bob with the Crescent Pilots. I wanted to, if you have any specific plans on a grant value beneficial use project, which is in Magnolia, Anchorage on the river. And I wanted to know when they were going to start, because they kind of installed a pipe across down my whole Anchorage, so it disallows the utilization of that anchorage, and it's a very, very important anchorage. We're totally collaborating and partnering with CPRA for beneficial use, and it's a great project, but they put the pipe there within that dredging. So I wanted to know if you had any specifics on the time span between the installation of the pipe and the actual dredge being this. Weeks Marine has got the contract.
Yes, yeah, I was gonna say, Weeks has it. Let me get back to you on the details
Okay.
when that starts, but yeah, appreciate that. That's important.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Duett.
I've got 2 questions, if that's all right. But the first one is, with even in review of the annual plan, and obviously your presentation today, even in review of the annual plan, the first handful of pages there showing the project highlights and what you're working on. And the Corps of Engineers projects, just in the front section of the plan, totals over $16 billion in investment. So it's incredible to see those PPAs moving forward, feasibility studies moving forward. Given the fact that you're going to not be able to use BP oil spill funding to match those projects, it has to be state-only dollars. And we know that there's very limited investment right now in state-only dollars coming into the CPR trust fund. How do you all see, or do you have a plan to cost share these billions and billions of dollars expected to be expended on construction particularly?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Stewart. That's a good question. So right now, the first thing is to try to get working time credit with efforts either through capital outlay, state surplus, or the Mesa. And so that's really kind of the first point of emphasis is to work on that. the efforts on all of those projects is to do what we can. As an example, in Southwest Coastal, we're doing the design effort as working con credit with state surplus and GoMesa dollars. So that's our key focus because that allows us to utilize our capability and the Corps' capability to the best uses. And then when you kind of look beyond that, it's really pooling those same dollars, which is again GoMesa, capital outlay, and surplus, for any cash contributions that we need to make. So as an example, in West Shore, I think we've done a good job of doing as much work in con credit as we can through either the land rights alert process, through the building of river introduction to Maurepas and other efforts like the 2 West Shore ridges that are part of that. And then from that, there will be a cash balance, and then we'll pay that through both surplus as well as GoMesa. And so it's continuing that effort. Obviously, as these projects get bigger, like St. Tammany, you have that focus to get additional work, dollars from surplus. And so, hopefully this year that we have a large surplus, we can have pieces of those dedicated to those projects.
Okay, and secondly, shifting gears a little bit, I did see you guys in front of appropriations this week talking about the Secretary 7 version, and you fielded some of the questions that have been asked about that project. The project is only listed in the annual plan this year on table 18, and it talks about the expenditure that's going to be planned for FY26. The total is $572 million. It looks like it's going to be spent down in FY26 for a total of 32% of the entire plan value for this year. So if you could sort of talk a little bit about the construction and implementation of that project in FY26, what tasks you have remaining that you can achieve, given the stop work order that was issued last year by Clackamas Parish government and the winding down of that work. If you could just speak to that a little bit, I think that the group might appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. So the annual plan is really looking at the spending authority and getting that. Obviously, there are challenges there on the implementation side of that with the stop work order. And so we're trying to work through that to I guess, provide as much of the early works activities that are part of the allowed activities that can go on. But really looking at the annual plan looks at the spending authority over that 12-month process. And so that's where I think it was roughly 572 or 527 to your point. That is part of it.
Mr. Tuck?
Hey, Mr. Lede. We just went through some of the highlights from 24. I think, the agency is always to be commended. These annual plan breakdowns make my heart happy in that you see a construction percentage that's 80% or above. You hear a lot of chatter about DOTD and some of that, how that agency functions, and then you look at this and you say, man, this is a really great example. Can you talk a little bit, kind of to Cynthia point a second ago, about the percentage of spend concentrated in 1 or 2 large projects? We talked about Mid-Barrett area. There's a significant percentage of Mid-Barrett area as part of the FY25 plan that we're currently implementing. Can you talk to how much of the plan as a whole for FY25 we have already extended or moving forward on, and what percentage? What's our gap to potential this year, and what percentage of that might be part of being hung up in Mid-Barrett area right now?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tucker. I'd have to get back to you on those numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head, but some of the large projects, as you mentioned, Mid-Barrett area, Morganton to the Gulf, HNC lot river introduction are big pieces of that 1.8 billion, right? And so that's just the nature of these projects get bigger. So if there's a challenge in implementation for any of those, then that money obviously gets carried forward to the next fiscal year for implementation through that process. So for any of those, you can only do so much work in that 12-month period. And so that funding really just gets carried forward unless it's obligated to some other effort down the road.
Glenn, I have a follow-up. I know it wasn't part of your presentation, but it's obviously top of mind for a lot of folks. About a year ago or so, when there were questions about progress on construction of the Mid-Barrett area, the authority, the agency, indicated that
it was committed to construction, that the EIS process, the science and the data engineering that had gone into the project was sound, and that CPRA had shared, as high level, sound information with the Corps as possible in the development of the EIS. I realize that there are things that have changed. I wonder if you guys have, in the hesitancy perhaps towards constructing the project, if there has been additional information that's been developed regarding that EIS, not the finances necessarily, but the EIS that may be giving pause. And a reason. And the second question I have is related to the Atchafalaya Basin, but I'll get to it after you, if you don't mind addressing it first.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we're working with the Corps on all of those processes as we do on an EIS. We have two outstanding litigations, both from the federal and state side. And so just do what we can to evaluate that and try to resolve any challenges we have.
Okay. I appreciate that. Related to the Atchafalaya Basin, I know that we've met with the Corps several times about their Lower River Comprehensive Management Study, and CBRA is putting together a master plan for the Atchafalaya Basin. And really appreciate that. I mean, I have been inundated with comments from recreational fishermen who utilize the basin. I grew up fishing the basin. It's in peril. There's water quality issues, there's sedimentation issues. The fisheries production has declined, I would say, pretty significantly in the last 25 to 30 years. I know that the Corps, one of the things that they continue to focus on when they do public updates regarding the Lower River Comprehensive Management Study is potential altering the flows of the Old River Control Structure. A real focus on management in the Atchafalaya Basin, mainly for flood control. My question is about funding. As you guys move through the Atchafalaya Basin Master Plan process, you identify projects that not just handle flood control, but also bring back habitat, sediment management, et cetera. What is a potential source of funding for that? Is the Corps' Lower River study that could potentially be translated into work of projects, once the study is completed? Is that something that you guys are thinking about in terms of addressing some of the long-term concerns in the Atchafalaya Basin?
Yes, yeah, great question. Yeah, so, on the state, just to address a couple of things. On the state side, we're going through the master plan process. We've got a lot of good feedback. To your point, a lot of those potential projects that were submitted were on the hydrologic modification side, on that water quality side. So there's certainly a need there, and I think we've identified that. Our program right now is funded through capital outlay on the state side. So that, was really how the program was set up as it was developed under DENR and then carried over to the state. So that's kind of the continuation of that program through the annual plan process where we build some of those projects like you see us doing here in Iberville and like you did in Cove Launch. As we work with the Corps and Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Management, obviously large projects will be identified in that 5-year mega study. And then in addition to that, they're going to do other tier studies, to your point, that will be authorized in WRDA. Those would likely have that 65-35 cost share. And then it's up to the state. If it's in the coastal zone, obviously we would be the non-federal. And then looking for ways to find that 35% cost share. And so, yes, we do need to do that. I think, some of the work that we're doing right now, in some sense, is probably on the smaller scale, not the sort of statewide scale that you would see come out of Illinois. And so that is all funded through capital outlay. And then if these projects get larger, either regional or statewide, then we probably need to find other ways to kind of fund that, because you probably would get capped out in the cash line of credit that you have through capital outlay annually.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. McElroy. Mr. Broom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm honored to join the commission. Mr. Lede, excellent presentation. Very pleased to see the details, some of the details on the St. Tammany flood risk management project. That's a big deal for St. Tammany. Last week, there were a couple of smaller projects in St. Tammany announced. One was pretty self-explanatory, which was the lighthouse habitat restoration program, but the other one, the Mandeville Lakefront restoration, wetlands restoration program. Not many details provided on that through traditional sources. Could you share some insights into what the Mandeville Lakefront project is going to look like?
Yes, sir. That is the parish matching awards that you're referring to. That was a project led by St. Tammany Parish as well as City of Mandeville to restore a section of wetlands in front of the Cypress Swamp, I believe, on the west side of the Mandeville Lakefront, and then provide a shoreline protection component there as well. And so I think it's on the west side of that seawall.
What given what you said about the city of the parish, what will be the role of CPRA in that project?
Yes, so for these parish matching projects, we provide matching dollars so they can complete the project or leverage it to build something bigger. So we typically do an intergovernmental agreement and then provide that funding so they can either build a bigger project or complete the whole project.
Will you provide technical support, project oversight, and things of that nature?
Yeah, we typically do provide a little of both. If they need technical support, we can provide that as well as any oversight needed. A lot of those projects are contracted directly by the entities that the award is given to.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, sir, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, tell me a little bit more about the saltwater study.
Yeah, Mr. Johnson, that's a study that was authored in the Word of 2024 bill, looking at the really the impacts of the saltwater wedge in the Mississippi River in any ways to alleviate those impacts. I think that obviously you have to go through the study and come up with a number of selected projects that the Corps will evaluate, but looking at ways where there's water supply impacts or any of the mitigation that's needed. They've got a variety of those thoughts that the Corps is going to develop through that scoping process. So as that's kicked off, we'll certainly keep you and all of the stakeholders down there aware of that. That hasn't been funded yet, so it's just the authorization. And so we're trying to work with the Corps on that intent, and then eventually that would probably be funded in FY26 or beyond.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. O'Neill?
I'm sorry, do you have a cost estimate on how much that study would cost?
I would assume though, it's 3 by 3, so 3 million for 3 years. So we would have $1.5 billion. No, so just authorized and then look at that.
Okay, so you're responsible for 50% of that?
Yeah.
Y'all are
We're
working
the-
to get to that number, okay?
Yes. $1.5 billion.
Mr. O'Neill?
So with all the questions about the gap in the budget, one of the things that we have been keeping our eye on is the recent settlement in the Cameron Parish coastal erosion lawsuit, Carmouche firm versus several of the major oil companies. They're now litigating another case in Plaquemines Parish. My understanding is that there's 39 additional cases behind that are going to be in the billions of dollars estimated for each settlement. So is CPRA lobbying with the tort reform that the governor has mentioned previously to receive the benefit of any of the settlement funds coming to help shore up some of the budget shortfalls?
Well, Mr. O'Neill, so we're not lobbying anyway. We're just, we're part of that implementation process down the road, and obviously we'll build projects that are consistent with the master plan on the protection restoration side. But we're not, a part of that effort right now.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Cochran.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. You're really good at this. Level of detail you have to get to be able to do this and do this for that many projects is impressive, and I just want to congratulate you. That's hard to do. It does, though, frustrate me, to be fair, when there's no detail on the criteria. And I know there's complications there, but I'm trying to figure out how to be helpful, how to be useful. This is an advisory committee. It's hard to give advice without specifics, right? So I guess at least I'd like to get as good a sense as you had of what we should expect. There's a board meeting in 2 weeks. There's a legislature, the annual plan goes forward. What should we at least be expecting or preparing for relative to either the amount of money or any level of detail relative to discussions?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Carter. I think, the only way I can answer it is, right now it's really looking on the annual plan side, again, it's just that it's the spending authority. Obviously, just as you saw in FY25, there are challenges with the implementation side. That's what we have to work through. But, as you see on any of the projects, the grant is there. And so, I should say the funding resolutions as well as the restoration plan is there through their NIFWIP. And so that's part of that annual plan. That's those dollars are dedicated to. If there are challenges with that and that needs to be modified down the road, then that would need to be done. And then those changes would be reflected in future annual plans.
So your expectations at this point would be for that number relative to Mid-Berry Terry not to change?
Yeah, unless something changes between, now and that process, then yes. But until that changes, that is still part of those funding resolutions.
Do you have any expectations that would change before the board meeting?
It's always difficult to say, always working through that process to try to resolve the challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. And I appreciate you recognizing the knowledge that Glenn has had in this whole process. The good, the bad, the ugly. He has stayed the course. He's been so instrumental in the projects that we pursued and our direction, keeping us focused as well as he's been able to. And
there's a
I'd like to second
policy question, which I think you probably got input on as well, which is there is there is a danger here of losing public trust because of lack of information, and that's critical for this program. As well as anybody, there's going to need to be a lot more public resources dedicated to whatever we do because
right,
and yet
we're aware.
We can't even communicate with the public about a major project.
Well, it's a work in progress.
I know what you're going to tell me.
Well, and I mean, it's the truth. What I'm telling you, it's a work in progress. And, Plaquemines is one of those projects Plaquemines does not want. And the cost, when you start weighing the cost, and again, I've been sort of in the middle, listening to both sides. The cost is just the $2.8 billion doesn't even cover close to the cost of this project. And so that's all we're gonna say on this right now. I opened it up. I always want our meetings to be open and have these discussions, okay? But there's no reason to belabor it any further because the decisions haven't been made and there's a lot of surrounding circumstances around those decisions. So I appreciate the discussion. We know it's very important. And we're going to continue to push forward and do what we can. Okay? And I appreciate the comments. All right? Yes.
I will not belabor the point.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. That's all right.
Glenn, thank you. I too appreciate how much you've had to learn. I know you ran the agency before, you stepped away, you come back. But Tony, I want to make a point to mention that thank you for calling this meeting and being open. There you have an incredible amount of subject matter expertise when I look at this table and I think of decades of experience. I think of a lot of different degrees. And so, Glenn, I hope you really can value that as being support for you in your role as the agency. And there's so many we's here, right? And folks that have been on the ground for years and years and years doing this work. And so I hope you value it that you have a lot of people that remember when that happened or why we made these decisions that way. So, but I do appreciate, how much you've had to do in all that time. I will not belabor the point, but I will say that from our experience, and we've done things like polling, going to communities, etc. It's more than just Plaquemines Parish government. It is the people of Plaquemines Parish in those communities. I'm a resident of Jefferson. I obviously have huge ties in Lafourche and Terrebonne, which is obviously where I grew up. But what about for them? What do you have for them that's in this annual plan for Lafourche and Jefferson? that's restoration oriented. Chairman Dove mentioned at the committee hearing on Monday, he talked about a long distance sediment pipeline in a ridge. Where is that in the annual plan? How much money is dedicated to that? So only, not really belaboring a point, Tony, but just trying to get some additional, if you could help provide some information on some of that discussion plan, I think that would be helpful. I do have some additional annual plan questions, but just to follow up with that.
Well, talk about the land bridge that we're talking about, the subject.
Thank you for that question, Simone, I appreciate it. Yeah, so that is in the annual plan, we're kicking off that program, which is really that continuation, what we call the longest pipeline or the large scale marsh creation right there at North River Road, and then those regions in that vicinity. Then in addition to that, in the master plan, we have the Lower Barrett Area Land Bridge project as part of that as well, looking at ways to get sediment from the river to build that component as well as inshore sediment sources. And so all of that is really being kicked off now as well as funded through the FY26 plan. So I did not mention that. The total number I don't have at the top of my head, but it is part of our surplus dedication as well as Go Mesa, and I can get that exact number to you. I just don't have it at the top of my head.
I would appreciate that, and I'll of course follow up. When you understand the danger about saying something is in the master plan, when the 23 master plan was built on the framework and the base that both diversions on Mid-Breton and Mid-Barataria side were included in a future without action, right? And so we don't have a complete picture. If you are not going to move forward or those projects are going to be modified, that science-based coastal master plan that all of us participated in for years, you went through the length of it, that brings up questions there in that process if we are not to continue with something that was included in a future without action. So that's, I would also appreciate that you said that was surplus dollars, those kinds of things, because I would have asked about that. You mentioned surplus list. You also talked a lot about like work in kind crediting. Are you making sure your surplus list allows you to leverage that, right? It seems like a really important opportunity between Go Mesa dollars and surplus dollars for you to get that all important credits for those huge cost shares that you have on those federal authorized and appropriated projects.
Yeah, great question. We certainly are doing that. That is kind of the top of our list. It's all of these federal projects, whether it's West Shore or Hands of the Gulf or Barataria, whether we're building the mitigation, the restoration components, or the protection features that you see as partner with Tony and Terrebonne Levee District, then taking that and then submitting working time credit packages to the Corps to get that credit is certainly at the top of the priority list, because even though we are getting that 65% match from the Corps, that 35% share is locked. So we recognize that, and we're doing everything we can to pay that down so that we can do as much working time credit to use our capabilities and capacity as possible. So that's, again, all of our request this year to the legislature for surplus. That's really the top of that list. And then obviously the capital outlay, Go Mesa, and other sources.
I think in the past that has resonated well with the legislature to understand that crediting piece, that you are using your dollars and getting even more for that. I think that's something that they really understand and appreciate. So if you're putting your surplus list through that filter, I think that's really important to be able to gain support. There was a lot of maybe lack of understanding, especially last year when it came to surplus, or it's a whole new crop of legislators that you have to educate them on the fact that these coastal dollars cannot be spent elsewhere, can't be spent on roads or North Louisiana, et cetera. That is a hard thing to convey, and I think making sure that you're spending other available dollars that don't have all those strings to make sure that you're spending those well and getting more bang for your buck there, I think is really important. Just two more questions, if I can, please. Do you have any idea about your Go Mesa revenues for this year and what that looks like?
All indications.
I saw that it like bumped up,
yes,
right?
All indications are we'll continue to reach the cap. So unless something changes, we believe it'll be roughly a little over 125 million that you saw. So we will hopefully get that check in the next few weeks, typically. It was the last week or first week of April. And so, all indications, LSU does an annual report that they provide, really an outlook on that. And so it seems like we're going to continue getting the cap for the next several years.
Okay, I have 1.5 questions. Second, do you, because of that or anything else, do you expect, not to Steve's point about the mid-Barataria money, do you expect other significant changes in the draft from final when it goes to board approval?
No, I think the major change is slight uptick in FY 26 and 27 revenue there, just because of the projects that we either trying to accelerate construction on or just move money around in 3 fiscal years to try to get to construction as soon as possible. That's probably the biggest change. But it's really, with GoMesa, if we assume that we'll hit the cap over the next 3 years, it's trying to allocate that money so that we can, build projects and leverage the $4 on that 65% match.
Okay, I saw I think in Mr. Swiber's update that I want to switch gears, talk about Drive. Is that something you can update us on as well? They are expected another report. Where do you see the Drive initiative right now as it relates to CBRA?
Yes, so in the last report, you saw that, we will continue to remain our autonomy and we're not going to be part of that reorg. I think one of the things that we're trying to provide them support is their continuation of development of IRMA, which is that upland resource effort. It's the effort to provide flood risk reduction, the state kind of point of contact for that outside of the coastal zone. So we'll probably continue to support DENR as well as DOT in that process.
I'm assuming you need legislation for the creation of IRMA, or
Yes,
so.
we are not leading that, so
Okay.
DENR is leading that, but I can't speak to that. But
Okay. If you had to guess, you might expect legislation to come to put that structure into.
I would think so.
Okay, all right, thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. All right, go ahead, yeah.
My name's Charles Daffner. I'm new, so pardon me if I'm out of place, but thank you for the presentation, Mr. Day. I've watched these projects and they're great. And I've watched them as a resident on Lake Pontchartrain. We have 25% of the state's population lives in the Lake Pontchartrain Basin. And we seem to, since Katrina, or maybe before that, we seem to be going around the lake patching and saying, when the water rises, these will be the things that help us survive or reduce the losses. Instead of, and I'm going to say Tammy Parish Treasurer, so I see this giant amount of money with the flood risk management project, and I'm like, well, that's great, but it seems like instead of waiting or trying to mitigate when the water rises, we ought to be trying to stop the water from rising with some type of storm surge project. And I know y'all are going to take a look at it, and we've looked at it since I think the 80s. But you would think that as a cost benefit to the amount of people and the amount of damage that's been done, Orleans Parish, the Western Lake Pontchartrain communities, St. Tammany, and all of this is mostly done for tropical events. So if we can reduce, even if it's a speed bump to slow the water down getting in Lake Pontchartrain, it seems like it would be a no-brainer. So is there any real possibilities of some type of storm surge protection in the St. in the Lake Pontchartrain Basin?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, obviously the work for the Greater New Orleans system, West Shore provides a significant amount of work that is part of that $5.9 billion to provide really what I would consider comprehensive flood risk reduction across St. Tammany Parish. And then as you move into Tangipahoa, you get this, similar things that are hopefully authorized in Florida 26. When you're talking about kind of protection at the, what I would say, kind of the east side of the lake before it actually gets in there, that is part of that Lake Pontchartrain storm risk management study that the Corps is kicking off through Florida 24. And so, obviously, I know those studies do take time, but all of these pieces of infrastructure are so large, complex, and obviously expensive. It does take that federal component sometimes to be able to, one, get it completed, authorized, and then eventually funded. And And so, we'll continue that commitment to work with them and the congressional delegation to do that. But I think what you'll find is with all of these different types of efforts, that they all together provide kind of comprehensive protection. You know, you see in the master plan, all the different types. It's not one thing, as Simone mentioned, it's kind of the comprehensive nature of it. So in St. Tammany, you see that non-structural home and elevations and residential floodproofing and commercial floodproofing paired with levees provides that protection. There's some state-only enhancements to that. And so it's trying to put all that together to provide comprehensive protection. But we do have a project as part of the 23 master plan that will be a feature or alternative in this federal study that will kick off that will hopefully address your concern there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Appreciate it, Mr. Glenn.
Thank y'all for having us.
Great
And
job.
appreciate the expertise that you provide, and I'll look forward to future quarterly meetings. Thank you. Chairman.
Mr. Kaplan, just to expand on that, you know, of course, I'm getting used to being on the state instead of just Terrebonne Parish and Lafourche these days. But the next thing out of my mouth after Lafourche and Terrebonne is St. Tammany. You know, 400-some-thousand people there, and there's one place, you know, based on population that you would tackle, that would be it.
It's a whole lake on it's not just.
Yeah, well, I know, but I'm just saying, especially over that way, right? And so, yeah, we got to do something pretty soon, you know. One thing that we've been working on is trying to move some of these projects. And we have estimates on moving some of these projects forward, on maybe something outside the box as an emergency before the emergency takes place. And I know it's not that easy, but we've been talking about that, seeing with the new administration if there's some possibilities and opportunities to do that instead of waiting for the emergency to take place, like took place in Charles. How about we do it ahead of time? You know, how about we fill in those gaps and try to prevent some of the things that you're talking about ahead of time? And so we've really been pushing hard on that. I've noticed a couple of things, you know, on a local level. Of course, you have to deal with the feds and in the state, but when you're on the state level, it moves a little bit slower than that, you know. So, you know, we're trying to be patient and push forward based on putting as much work as we can on the ground to protect the public. So, appreciate that. Yeah. Okay.
Follow-up question?
Yes, ma'am.
What are some of those emergency ideas you're thinking about, and what process, like how, where is that process?
Well, so, you know, I think especially when you deal with the Corps of Engineers, I mean, I'll just say it, I haven't been a big fan of theirs lately, probably like a bunch of us. You know, when it gets tied up in regulatory and it gets tied up in environmental, the projects, by the time they come out the other end of that, they double and triple the cost. And that's why it becomes an affordability problem at that point where you're going to get the funds. And so I'm trying to, you know, the Corps is very capable. We saw that after Katrina, right? They built 300 miles of levee in a matter of 3 or 4 years. So they're capable, but it's just to try to, under emergency, it allows you not to get past regulations, not to bypass mitigation, but maybe to do the most important thing, which is put the work on the ground and protect the public, and then handle it. And so I would like to see a lot of these projects that have been tied up be done on an emergency. What constitutes an emergency? Well, we live in an emergency every year for hurricane season, pretty much. We go through an emergency, right? It's emergency time on the coast of Louisiana. And so that's been my push. And, you know, whether it grows legs or not, I think it's looking like it's moving in a pretty good direction, but it takes time. So that's what we're working on. That's my take. So thanks for the question. All right, moving on. Thanks again, Glenn. Resiliency Task Force update, Stephen Schweiber, Louisiana Chief Resiliency Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Advisory Commission. As it says on the slide, my name is Stephen Schweiber. I serve in the Governor's Office as the Chief Resilience Officer. And I'll get into a little bit to explain, because I do not believe that the Resilience Office was presented to this commission prior. So I'll do some brief introductions about what exactly a Resilience Officer does and some of the work that's been ongoing over the past year. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll go back to 2023, Act 315 of the 2023 regular session. I believe it's been filed by Representative Zarang, with plenty of co-sponsors on the Senate side. Created a Office of Chief Resilience Officer in the Governor's Office, and also created a task force and interagency council, which I'll get here for a second. But first, I want to go into what exactly is the scope. So the acts of resilience shall be a capability to anticipate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from significant multi-hazard threats with minimal damage to social well-being, the economy, infrastructure, and the environment. So there's a lot of words to sort of parse in there. You can imagine multi-hazard threats include hurricanes, extreme heat, drought, saltwater wedge, pandemic. Really the ones that we can predict regularly and prepare for, and even those ones that sometimes catch us by surprise. That's sort of the scope and mission of the Resilience Office. You can see a couple of graphics here that I pulled from the annual report. Basically includes hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. You see kind of in that quote there in the middle, the sort of disaster cycle, right? You anticipate, you prepare, you respond, and then you recover. I think there's actually kind of a step missing maybe in that definition, which is to adapt, right? You learn from each successive disaster, and you use those lessons learned to apply for the future, which I guess goes right back into the anticipate and prepare for. But I think the adaptation is really a major focus of this effort as we're charged by the legislature. So let me get into our government structure here. Every agency, give or take, within state government has a resilience officer. This is throughout this from the Supreme Court, Office of Community Development, CPRA. Mr. Grandy serves as the resilience officer for CPRA. So that's iterated throughout state government. And those people are kind of the charged with being the resilience conscience of their respective office or agency, right? They're the person who's supposed to kind of take some of the lessons learned, some of the things, and have that mindset, bring that perspective into their everyday operations. Those officers come together to form the Interagency Resilience Coordination Team. We meet regularly by statute at least 4 times a year to compare notes, and that becomes a really critical intergovernmental communication. So what you're going to see from this effort is a real whole of government approach, which is kind of the trendy thing to say, that you're not in silo your efforts, and that's something I think, not just resilience in a lot of other areas, like the governor and the legislature have been pretty clear that de-siloing, so you're not repeating and duplicating efforts throughout state government, and that you attain those synergies that you would get. Like if you were in a business, you would not want your FP&A to not talk to your sales, to not talk to your operations, to not talk to your engineers, right? So we're bringing that sort of same approach to state government. We all get together and say, oh, hey, if one office is working on this effort, another one's working on that, how could those bridge together? How can those work better in conjunction? So that's going to be regularly. Those are not public meetings. Those are behind closed doors, and sometimes they're kind of ad hoc or impromptu. I'll just get a few resilience offices together to talk about a particular effort, or we go through email threads, that sort of thing. The Resilience Task Force is the blue ribbon commission that we have, right? That's the leaders within state government. It's cabinet officials, Department of Insurance, legislators. We've got Representative Zarang and Senator Rick Edmonds serving this year. Board of Regents, Public Service Commission, local government, so the Parish President Association, the Police Jury Association, the Municipal Association all send representatives to this task force. This is kind of two-part, right? They get to hear from the members from me, the CRO, and the members of the coordination team what's going on, and then they get to in turn provide that strategic direction to me and the team. What we continue working on and how we can continue to improve. So, and those are public meetings. Those kind of happen in the committee room with microphones to TVs and all the bells and whistles. So I'm going to get into. So we did have a meeting last week, and I think I'll get into that a little bit later. One thing is that every year, the Chief Resilience Officer has to provide a report to the legislature in writing by February 15th. That's been turned into the legislative library. We're going to get that posted to the governor's office here pretty shortly, but I wanted to give y'all the update from that report so that you get the benefit of this update as well. You don't have to go read the whole thing. All right, so we've got some ongoing efforts that, now keep in mind, again, the Resilience Office is just one person appointed within the governor's office. I could take credit for none of these efforts. These are just things that are happening with the wonderful people throughout state government, within our agencies, within our offices that I want y'all to be aware of and that we're kind of coordinating and monitoring on that statewide level from the governor's office, from that 10,000-foot perspective. So these are things I think y'all should know about, I think the public should be aware of, and that we can do better when we combine in some sort of resilience conscious way. So we've got the DRIVE initiative. Ms. Veloz and Glenn talked about that a moment ago. This is the kind of DENR-led reorganization, not just of the DENR agency itself, which traditionally has a permitting and regulatory role, but kind of a statewide natural resources management, right? So part of that includes water management, recognizing water as a natural resources that should fit more comfortably within the state's water resources governance framework, right? It's been very, a little bit ad hoc in some of the ways that governance works between, aquifers, water resources, water quality. So that'll be a part of this effort. And I'm only one participant in this very large working group. They have a whole 100-some page final report draft on the governor's website that we can send out to anybody who's interested. And as well as you indicated, legislation and real final reports are very shortly coming. Statewide flood control, that's IRMA, that's the Upland Resources Management Authority. That is something that is going to mimic, right, their original proposals to sort of merge this with CPRA's incredibly exemplary framework, right? I mean, as you all here seem to be very well aware from the questions that you asked Mr. Ledet, CPRA's structure, science-based planning, broad stakeholder engagement, and that entire project prioritization process that CPRA goes through is exemplary nationwide. That is something when I travel and I talk to colleagues in other states and colleagues in the federal government, it's a gold standard, it really is. And so that's something that is probably lacking in the statewide flood control apparatus that currently just sort of lives at DOTD, and they do what they can with the resources that they have. But we think that we can replicate some of CPRA's success in doing that and ultimately bring down statewide flood insurance premiums, because that's going to be a focus that we'll get into a little bit later. Data and model governance, now this is going to be something that's going to impact the coastal zone as well as the non-coastal zone. And really merging those efforts that we've done statewide, including the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, which is with significant resources in data and modeling, as well as our non-government partners who have put significant resources into hydrographic data modeling. That includes the Water Institute, that includes LSU, that includes the Bywater Institute, and that also includes DOTD, which has all the H&H capabilities of state government housed within them. So that sort of coordination and governance, I expect once we get some legislation around this, that we'll have, you're going to hear a lot more about efforts to really get this into a position where we think it could be exemplary for the rest of the nation. And then power resiliency, that's another thing that is traditionally not much of a role for state government, is making sure that we reduce outages. That traditionally just lives with the Public Service Commission to regulate, not necessarily to promulgate. Some of the federal funding opportunities that we've had in recent years, including RIC grants and other Department of Energy initiatives, have really increased the state's role in funding and having those programs. So to maybe consolidate the governance or have that executive branch role in increasing power and resiliency is also a feature of the DRIVE initiative final plan. To that effort, the Office of Energy, which is recently created by statute within DENR, is working on the Hubs for Energy Resilient Operations, that is the HERO program. That's a $250, give or take, $1 million effort, 50% match from project participants to create what they call resilience hubs. Resilience hubs are basically backup generators at critical infrastructure or community critical locations that serve as shelters or operation centers during outage events, namely mostly hurricanes or wind-driven events. These are powered by locally, right, by power generation at that source, so that they can continue to operate off the grid. So that program currently has 11 pilots, including Massachusetts Water Board of New Orleans, some Together Louisiana deployable battery hubs, and National Guard facilities with off-grid power capabilities. I think those are solar powered. So this will be the pilot programs, but we ultimately anticipate there to be in the around 300 ultimate implementation projects going out for RFP in 2026. So that is something that will be going around the state soliciting project ideas. If any of your local communities or some organizations you think could serve as a resilience hub, we'll get you in touch with that Office of State Energy for ultimate participation in that program. GOSEP, the good people at what was GOSEP and going forward will be a part of the National Guard apparatus, have been working diligently every year the past many years to apply for building resilient infrastructure in communities and flood management grants. These are FEMA grants that have been historically pretty tricky to secure. The state office has put in a lot of effort into figuring out why past applications were unsuccessful and ultimately increasing Louisiana's share. These are FEMA grants that are intended to kind of reduce flood insurance payouts ahead of time by building infrastructure and making communities more resilient on the front end, which I think you would argue ultimately has a great return on investment, because instead of going back and repairing all these communities afterwards, you just do the mitigation on the front end. So these are successful applications from this year that the GOSEP was able to submit and get the FEMA funding. Major projects include the Gretna Green Distributed Green Infrastructure. There's two greens, but more details on that can be found on their website. We had significant power pole replacements in Fouche and Central. Those each got somewhere in the 20 to 30 million range. And then, of course, you got a lot of home buyouts, home elevations, and other more typical projects that you see in these programs. The Department of Transportation is currently working on a resilience plan. That is a voluntary effort that they participate in their PROTECT grants. That's an acronym too. I don't know what it stands for. That'll increase their highway funding, federal program funding through the U.S. Department of Transportation. That process is currently public facing and ongoing through Dewberry Engineers, who's running that program. So if anybody's interested in how to make transportation infrastructure more resilient, by all means, engage with that program. Southeastern Louisiana Stormwater Management Plan. This is something that kind of bridges, CPRA's work. This is not an ongoing effort yet. This is something that's called for by statute in some of the sewage and water board legislation from last year. That is currently seeking a funding source. There's a quarterly Southeastern, Greater New Orleans region, basically all this, Jefferson, St. Bernard, St. Charles, and Plaquemines are coming together at quarterly meetings to hash out how to better coordinate stormwater management in the multi-parent, it's basically the SELA footprint. So we'll hope to have some more updates as we identify funding sources and maybe get a formal planning process initiated. The Office of Community Development, this is the office that spends HUD money. HUD comes in behind FEMA and allocates those funds to rebuild communities. A lot of you are probably familiar with their work. So they have incorporated fortified gold standards into their recovery project. That means when they go and rebuild a house, they're putting that fortified roof on there, and they're making sure that homeowner is going to have those reduced insurance premiums and that increased resiliency to storms moving forward, which is an excellent step. They have 465 million of applications in process. I think those are approved, and just going through that finalization process for Resilient Communities Infrastructure Program, or RCIP. Those applications are largely driven at the parish level. They include some, what you would almost consider coastal projects for increasing the resiliency to storm surge and other flood risks. So I encourage you to look up those awarded projects as well. And there's $902 million that they're administering for the Louisiana Watershed Initiative for flood control projects throughout the state. Those are dealing with riverine and rain flooding, not the coastal storm surge. That's sort of solely within CPRA's wheelhouse, but that we're kind of monitoring as ongoing efforts moving forward. And to that point, I neglected to put in the slide, but of course we're talking with CPRA and about the non-structural components of both the southwestern projects, which have been groundbroken. That's also a multi-billion-dollar project, as well as the St. Tammany. And we'll probably have a robust discussion going forward about that conversation that y'all need to have here, that the CPRA board needs to have, that the master planning process really needs to have about when structural is appropriate versus non-structural, right? The limitations that are going into that conversation at the core level probably need to be had at the state level as well, because we have our own treasure trove of data, our own expertise, such as the members that sit here on this board. You guys know the conditions on the ground, and if we continue to let those decisions be made in Washington, not that that's, CPRA is obviously very participant, but I want to make everybody aware that that's going to be a really big deal moving forward. What are we going to put in coastal projects? What are we going to put in structural protections, such as levees and flood walls? And what are we going to do at the individual house, home level? And when is that appropriate? That's going to be a big part of this conversation, I think, over the next 5-10 years of coastal restoration. Okay, that's kind of a little lap around state government of what's going on in resilience outside of CPRA, because I know Glenn covers all that really, really well. Let's look forward to 2025, right? There's one issue that we're going to be talking about in 2025 pretty much exclusively, and that's insurance availability, affordability, and problem risk. I've got some. I hate to put just text up on the slide and ask people to read it. I think that, it's generally considered poor practice, but I wanted to put this up here because we've got some kind of large level goals here of what we want to do. Right, we want to get the citizens' rolls down. We want to make sure that risk reduction dollars are going as far as they possibly can to reduce people's insurance premiums. We want to pilot innovative models. We want to promote good governance, both at the local and the state level, to make sure that we're not putting people in a position to be at risk and ultimately accrue more insurance claims, which drive up premiums. And we want to quantify the efficacy of risk reduction measures. That goes a lot into the modeling, the data, the studying that we can do, that we can aggregate at our level. And then you can hold insurers accountable to make sure that when they're acting in our market, they're acting in a responsible way that properly credits our residents and our businesses for the risk reduction that is taking place around here. Insurance can be a real lagging indicator. We hopefully can have some forward-looking models that when we say, hey, OCD has done over 7,000 structures, we want to make sure that they're getting the premiums that they're entitled to actually earn. So those are going to be, I invite all of you to participate in this task force process. As we talk about it, we'll look as you can see, pretty much any idea that reduces insurance is going to be something that's going to be relevant to the task force. Anything. Come with anything, Representative. So we recently had a task force meeting in March 2025. The theme of this meeting was some of our non-government partners who are doing this work throughout the state, and this work being ongoing in the hopes that by getting everybody together in one room and coordinating with state government, we can achieve those synergies that the task force is all about. So we had presenters from the American Flood Coalition. That's a nationwide group that just best practices modeling and funding opportunities for flood reduction everywhere. They bring a really nice multi-state perspective. The Resilience Innovation Hub is a private group that's trying to bring private capital to these mitigation efforts through different bonding structures, different financial structures that ultimately, because it would take well over $2 billion to fortify every roof in the coastal zone, and I don't have $2 billion. So ultimately, private capital is going to have to come to the table, especially when you're talking about humongous benefits such as reducing insurance premiums. LSU came, that was both La House, Carol Friedland, and their NSF engine application to reduce risk statewide, that's a whole other thing that I think that we have to present to you as well. And a CEER, that's a Center for Risk and Resilience, that is currently being stood up at LSU to kind of focus on exactly what we're talking about, flood control, data modeling, and non-structural risk reduction efforts. Fortified Gulf Coast, those are some inspectors in New Orleans who have a lot of ideas for improving the Fortified program. And of course, the Water Institute, our lovely host today, who have a lot of ongoing efforts in the kind of data modeling and resilience world as well. So and they have an Office of Resiliency that's also doing some insurance pilots that we're pretty excited about. So this is kind of just a little snapshot of the work the nonprofits are doing in this space. And with that, I'm gonna wrap up. That's kind of the speed run of what we've been doing and what we've been watching and coordinating on. And I think you guys benefit from being aware of. So open the floor to questions.
Representative Walker.
You mentioned DOTD's resiliency program, and you mentioned the company that they're working with, something like DeBerry or something.
Dewberry.
Dewberry?
Dewberry?
You have a contact for someone?
Of course.
Okay, I'd like to get that one from you. I have some issues that resiliency and storm resiliency for some of our elevated highways to Fouchon, very important to keep that energy corridor operating, that have not 3 years plus post-Ida have still not been addressed.
That's an excellent point. And those evacuation routes.
Yeah, well, let's hope we don't have to evacuate at night, because some of the lighting that got destroyed during Ida still to this date has not been resumed. And despite weekly calls with DOTD, parish, and other entities, still haven't been able to get them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for the presentation, and good luck in the role. It's a lot. Do you, I don't know all the programs that you talked about, but it seems to me that there's a pretty heavy dependence on federal funding and a lot of this stuff.
That would be fair, yes.
Have you been able to do yet any exposure analysis or risk analysis relative to the efforts to reduce federal funds flowing to the state?
I would say that everything I talked about today is agreed to and ongoing. We have not had any trouble drawing down funds from those programs. These are not EJ programs, with the exception of one or two that come through our non-government partners. But as far as the government programs are concerned, we've not experienced interruptions in those funding sources.
Go ahead.
You sure? Okay, I'll let you actually know that. Thank you so much for coming today, Mr. Schweiber. Very open-ended, good to see you bring the work forward of the CRO office and position. You brought up the GOSEP and National Guard kind of consolidation. Having worked around a lot of local governments and in local government in and out for a long time, do you have any insight on how that is going to get operationalized, especially with storm season coming? How many folks from GOSEP, is there such a real core of expertise there on how to navigate both pre and post disaster, especially fighting for FEMA dollars? How many of those folks maybe making the move over to Lang, or do you have any insight that you can share on that kind of new command structure?
Yeah, I'll be totally honest. That's not my. It's not one of my efforts. That I know that the first way to effectualize it is just to put the Lang leadership kind of into the leadership positions and to kind of have them co-hold those roles. And that's more the first step to melding those operations together. It's by no means an elimination of services or other critical functions that GOSEP obviously, as they communicate with FEMA, performs every single time we have a disaster. It's I know that the first step is just to make sure that they're under the same leadership, and that that's maybe helps things fall into place. There might be statutory changes, but as I said, I'm not really working on it.
The second question I had was, he kind of alluded to it a little bit on the insurance side of the task force, but we all wear a lot of different hats, work with different nonprofits who are doing a lot of good work to implement some of those risk reduction measures, like Rebuilding Together New Orleans, or Bayou Chapter, or some of those other groups. Do you have like a feedback mechanism or a stakeholder engagement plan to solicit some of their expertise? They do a lot of work in terms of the Fortified Roof Program and really helping residents be able to take advantage of some of those programs?
Yeah, so we, the task force, of course, having their public meetings, their public feedback, stakeholder engagement is part of that process. And then I think beyond that, it kind of goes down to those individual agency levels as they work through their programs and have good public stakeholder engagement. So I wouldn't say that it's going to be like a big document that's like, oh, here's our public stakeholder engagement.
Do you see almost like almost an advisory commission, somewhat like this, but less formal, that you would help to run to try and kind of connect that thread across all of those agencies and deliver that feedback to those guys?
And across, so for the agencies, we of course have the interagency working group, where we have those resilience officers and we can kind of build that connected tissue. Now, when it comes to maybe some of our non-government partners, it could be helpful in the future to formalize something, but I wouldn't want it to be exclusionary.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you. Oh, good.
I want to hit on non-structural a little bit if we can. You were in the master plan discussions where in places like on the North Shore, you edge up on non-structural where half of it is due to coastal and half of it is due to river, right? And with limited coastal dollars, that I see that as maybe like a place where you could have some tension there, right? Because we are limited in the dollars, and so how far do our dollars go to cover coastal, et cetera, non-structural measures? But all along the way, we're learning so much about non-structural, especially in Southwest Louisiana with the Corps initiative there, and the Corps has big plans all across the country for non-structural measures. So there's a couple of workforce things that go into that, certainly, but most importantly, non-structural is such an individual decision. And whereas we build levees or we big coastal projects, it's for the benefit of the community over the individualism. Non-structural measures literally goes to somebody's house, right? And what are those barriers to entry? Why did you say no to what we think is free money? What are your challenges there, et cetera? So we are keenly interested in that. We want to make sure that we're having a positive conversation on kind of knowing the difference between, what's coastal flooding, what's riverine, mostly just in the money. But we want to continue on that journey on risk reduction when it comes to non-structural measures. And again, understanding that there's so much individual risk reduction there, but choices as well.
Absolutely, I think you just said it right. It's going to be a journey. In as much as a statewide flood control, and I'm going back to the DRIVE initiative a little bit here, the statewide flood control apparatus that, of course, doesn't intersect with CPRA would be focused on riverine and rain stormwater flooding. And that's going to be kind of a separate and parallel rail to this wonderful coastal and storm surge protection that we've set up. But I think you're right in that you can't be entirely parallel because you're going to intersect, right? I think the best example is New Orleans. Right? The history of New Orleans is filled with conflict of getting the stormwater out and not letting the storm surge in. And things that help to get the stormwater out always allow more water to come in. That's kind of something that the levee board versus the sewage, well, not versus, but there's been historical friction, and this is going back hundreds of years, between those two competing missions. Where do you put the floodgates, the pumps, and everything like that? That's something that I think we wanted to get to in the early stages of DRIVE by consolidating these efforts, but of course the commingling of funds and the concerns about hurting CPRA's mission ultimately took precedence. But I think that the idea that coastal and riverine stormwater, water just doesn't categorize itself like that, right? It's all water and it's all flooding. And eventually there's going to have to be a serious discussion once we set up these parallel rails of how to make sure that they communicate properly and intersect properly.
Good. Yes, ma'am. Let's do
Question,
it.
and it's going to show my ignorance about your CRO role probably, but I'll ask it anyway. I know that CPRA through the master planning process develops community vulnerability indices and basically through modeling what land loss is slated to occur over years 20, 30, 50. Is it the purview of the CRO to investigate managed retreat for communities that are either extremely vulnerable outside levee systems or, what we define as vulnerable communities? Are you all in charge of developing plans surrounding managed retreat or investigating what the future of that may look like?
Yeah, I think that's one of those areas that's definitely kind of within the coastal realm at this point. Like I said, we have so much strong governance in the coastal system that a lot of my efforts kind of focus on things outside of the coastal zone right now because we do have so many good people and so much resources basically available for. But that's a very deep and complicated conversation that has to happen both really from the ground up. And I know the Water Institute does a lot of work on that sort of community planning. So does CPRA and all those other, and that is also a consideration of that FMA and those FEMA programs, right? When it comes to doing those buyouts, and also obviously from the local levy board level, where do you put these projects, and how much are you willing to spend to cover X or Y amount of residents that would ultimately be outside of that flood protection? So, I guess your answer is I'd be the resilience office and the government would be a small cog in a much greater system for having those conversations.
Stephen, Terrebonne Lafourche is probably the epitome of everybody, taxpayers doing things right. And then, us talking about when we pass these taxes, 1/4 cent, 1/2 cent, having the CPRA participate, the state and local people participate. And when we're passing those taxes to build these levees or these pump stations to get water out, as you said, water out and stopping the water from coming in. Terrebonne Parish, for example, hasn't flooded in 15 years. And the flood insurance rates are unbelievable. They take into account none of that. When, we still can't get a formula out of them, right? The formula that they use, whatever that is, that formula. And it's hard to explain to the people at Terrebonne Lafourche after they tax themselves to prevent this on why this continues to happen. So those things there's just no real excuse or reasoning behind how they figure this out and which state they place. And that's the real help that we need in this whole thing.
Thank you, Chairman. I was a resident of Gibson for the last 8 years before joining the governor's office, and I was really thankful when that levee went up very quickly, right behind my house. I could see Morganza to the Gulf from where I was at, and I thought I was thankful when it came there. I was doubly thankful when Hurricane Ida came along. I was about 8 miles, give or take, from that western side of that eye wall.
Right.
And, if that would have been 10 years into the planning stage and then 4 more years into the implementation stage of the phase of the study and the discussion, it just wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
So I thank y'all for the work that y'all did on the Terrebonne Levee Board as well.
Well, hopefully we can fix that, right?
Exactly. Okay.
Any other comments?
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
All right, moving on, partner update on coastal restoration and fisheries. Tommy Tuma, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Tom?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Let me try to get my presentation loaded here. All right, my name is Tommy Tuma. I'm the Biology Administrator with our Office of Wildlife and Wildlife Fisheries. Excited to be here. First time attending the meeting, first time presenting. So, full disclosure, I found out I was going to do this presentation at 7:45 yesterday morning. So, if things don't make sense, I did my best to kind of throw this together. We was at job review until 3 yesterday. And depending on how this presentation goes, if they fire me, I may hire myself for the job review like I did yesterday. So, with that, you probably wondered how a guy with an accent like mine is over coastal properties, right? I guess I just love it. I'm from Central Louisiana. I went to Louisiana Tech with a forestry major. But when we talk about land management, all the principles are the same, right? You need to do an activity to manage the land to help that out. So today, that's my background. I'm going to highlight some of the things that we're doing on our coastal property. We have, I think, 13 donation refuge that Office of Wildlife is responsible for. So we have 53 wildlife management refuge, that's about 1.6 million acres of public land in Louisiana. So it's a lot, right? And WWF is the stewards that manage these properties. But we're going to talk about two specific properties today, and we'll touch briefly on some other coastal properties if you'll allow me. And so Glenn mentioned earlier in his presentation that they had received funding and a couple tags through the legislature or the legislative session last year. And two of those projects was White Lake Woodland Conservation Area and Marsh Island. I'm going to spend the majority of my presentation talking about that. And so those tasks that they gave were to develop a comprehensive master plan. CPRA and Wildlife Fisheries will work together to develop a comprehensive master plan for White Lake and Marsh Island. So we're going to start on White Lake. And with that master plan, we do have a contract with Royal Engineering, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank Karen Latuso, who's the project manager for Royal Engineering. She actually helped me built the majority of this presentation for me, so I'm not going to, wasn't too much under. I was under the gun, but she kind of saved me when I emailed her, said, hey, I need this information. We've been providing information to Royal, and she kind of had a clear enough of where all this information was, because there's 5 different employees from Wildlife Fisheries providing the information. So instead of getting that information from those 5, she was able to provide it for us. So let's talk about White Lake. If you're not familiar with White Lake, that's it. You see it's identified southwest of Lafayette. It's a very unique area. It's super important for wintering waterfowl. It is around 72,000 acres of freshwater intermediate marsh in Vermilion Parish. There's marsh and agricultural land. It was donated to the state of Indiana in 2022 by British Petroleum. And LWF leases parts of the land to farmers, ranchers, and hunters. And you see the crosshatch, you see the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway up at the top, kind of going through the property. North of there is a lot of agriculture, most of the agricultural land. You see UE3, that is marsh, and south of the Intercoastal Waterway on the eastern side of the property is also a little bit of ag land, but a little bit of agricultural land. It is a self-generated property, meaning all the money is raised on the property through these leases that we talk about, through surface leases, through some mineral revenue, through the disposal of some surplus property, through donations, through some lottery hunts. If everybody's familiar with White Lake, we used to have a corporate hunt. So we raise revenue to operate this property. And we're right now, since COVID, we haven't had the ability to have those corporate hunts, but we're operating on a surplus of about $200,000. We raise revenue about $1.2 million a year. We spend approximately $1 million. And so that's a good thing, right? The bad thing is it's an aging property related to infrastructure that's aging. When I talk about infrastructure, I talk about land use features, whether it be water control structures, levees, things of that nature, pumps. And then we have the facilities, the lodge and the associated facilities and all so on that. So when you talk about a surplus of $200,000 on these coastal properties, this commission, for sure, I didn't have to talk about, it's not a lot of money. So the governor's office has identified as a priority, and that's why we're developing this master plan, because what we see is wildlife fisheries, we don't have a knowledge problem. We know what the property needs. We know what we need to do. We have a funding problem. There's no reason for me to pay $5 billion for engineering design if I have a surplus of $200,000. I'll never have enough money. Or I say the department will never have enough money to appropriately manage this project. So that's what we're doing, is we're working with CPRA, and we're developing this comprehensive master plan, which will identify the priority feature projects we need to work on. It will also do some initial engineering survey and design with some cost estimates. So when we go to the legislature, when we go to our stakeholders and say, this is what we need to continue or to make sure that White Lake exists into the future. And why are we making these investments? We're making these investments to conserve this property so LWF can appropriately manage these properties, all right? And so what are our primary goals and objectives of White Lake? We want to sustain and manage the wetland habitat on White Lake. And we basically manage this wetland habitat for wintering waterfowl, right? It's a super important area for Vermilion Parish and surrounding areas. It holds these wintering waterfowl. They can provide great habitat for them, but they also get up and they move around, and hopefully people in the surrounding community can utilize these and have opportunity. So it's really important to manage this river. We manage the wildlife species associated with the wetland with primary focus on waterfowl, and then we maintain an agricultural presence on wetlands needs when feasible and compatible with wildlife, and that's our major funding source, is the reason we're doing it. If I had an endowment where we didn't have to do agriculture, we may would manage it differently. We may do agriculture maybe primarily just for the waterfowl usage and not for revenue production, right? So there's a lot of layers to this onion that we're building, right? So what are our challenges? I talked about that infrastructure that's aging, subsidence, lack of freshwater inputs, but it's just getting old. It's things are happening on White Lake on the landscape. So we have the erosion of the impounded levees. You saw the map. It's separated into 8 different management units. They all have levees surrounding them to keep the water out, right? We have the Unit 2, historically it's called the Caddo. It's a marsh, it's a refuge. It's a refuge that we manage. There's no access, there's no hunting. Due to the way it has been historically managed in the past by previous owners and LDWF, we have lowered the elevation. The elevation is -3 feet. In other words, that levee is keeping water out. And I can't get water off of it gravity. We have to have a pump to pump it off. So we have subsidence that's really affecting this problem, right? We have these levees that are deteriorating. We have levee breaches along Unit 2, the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, and the Florence Canal. And we have intensive management needed for the whooping cranes. If you don't know, we have an experimental population of whooping cranes on that we manage for. And then we have all this old oil and gas infrastructure that's all over the property that creates barriers for management, right? There's whole pipelines, we don't even know it. There's gas lines on top of the mountain. Whenever you're trying to rebuild a levee, you can't stack that dirt on top of the pipeline. You may actually have to move it, right? So if a storm comes through, there's some damage, there's a lot of times we can't go fix it immediately because you have this oil and gas infrastructure there. And then the lodge, it's in need of updating repairs in the associated facilities. I'm gonna focus on the land management today, more appropriately for this group, and not go into like the public use facilities, right? So this master plan development, I focus on the collaborative effort between LDWF and CPRA. The plan is due in October 2025, and will include the priority projects and cost estimates. And our goals are this, I went over those goals, and secondarily, we need to allow public access with minimal impact to wildlife and habitat. And then we want to start hosting this education outreach activities. Historically, we only allowed some lottery fishing and some lottery hunting on the property. We want to engage the community. We want to offer this build a world-class facility where we get schools out, we can get members of the public, the House Natural Resource Committee, they need to have a getaway and have a meeting, or this group could have a meeting. We could have a facility where we could have those type of activities, and we would like to facilitate research. It is a public property. We do wetland management, we do marsh management. We should engage our research and universities to accomplish research, which will provide kind of a blueprint to how to manage appropriately these marshes for private landowners and others. So past projects, we're not just sitting still, we're doing stuff with that surplus of $200,000 that I've talked about. We have, in 2010-11, we did the Unit 4 restoration pump drain. In 2013, we did some breakwater construction along the GIWW with help from Ducks Unlimited and some funding from LDWF and NACA. And then in 2022, we did a Unit 1 water control structure there. We had $650,000 there from multiple donors. In 23, the Louisiana Waterfowl Working Group through the legislature gave us $200,000. We installed pumps on that Unit 2 engine upgrades where we could get that water off of that management unit appropriately. We had a Unit 2 bridge repair right there, the second from the left, where the North Shore of White Lake had breached that levee where we did a cooperative endeavor with Ducks Unlimited. You see the bottom right-hand corner or left-hand corner. We had we created a levee with some rock and some we had to barge that material in. So there's a lot of logistical issues that you have. This year, or last year, 2024, those public use facilities where I talked about the lodge and the boathouse, we had the roofs replaced. That was storm damage from Hurricane Ida, or one of the hurricanes I can't remember, but that was 5 years to get those roofs replaced. And then we replaced the guillotine gate last year. We used the White Lake Fund, and that was approximately $400,000. So what we're identified as triage projects, and triage is usually a medical term to talk about priorities of where you need the most attention. So we have our triage projects. This is what the property is in most need of, right? First thing, the GIWW Shoreline Protection Project. We have broken it down into phases because you see the total is $126 million is what we need. Obviously, nobody's going to give us $126 million. So what we have is I know it's hard to see, it's kind of purplish, but the red is, hey, we've got to have this. We're one storm away. We've got dirt holding hands that's keeping water out. And that is super important because if that levee breaches to the north, the water potentially and most probably makes it all the way to Gaynor, right? So it's not just protecting White Lake property, it's protecting a lot of Vermilion Parish. So we're actually getting a maintenance permit. The GIWW is a federal waterway. It's a little bit different. We do have a maintenance permit to rebuild some levees on the interior property, but since that's a federal navigation, it's a little bit different. But we're trying to get a permit where we can help kind of band-aid some of these bad spots until we can get a permanent fix of the shoreline protection, right? So you see we have it in phase 1, phase 2, and that's by priority. Obviously, phase 1 is an urgent need. All right, so we've identified this. We've done the survey, the Royal Engineer has done the survey, and we've worked with CPRA and Royal to develop this priority project list. The Unit 2 Impoundment Levee Stabilization Project. We talked about Tocado. Since it's in a refuge, it is super important, and a lot of public interest in Tocado Unit 2. I talked about that the elevation being -3. You can't get the water off. You have to pump the water off of it. We hope to get appropriate infrastructure in here where we can do forced irrigation and forced drainage, maybe even sub-impound some of that stuff. But the first thing we have to do is, it doesn't matter how we manage it, if we don't improve the levee system and keep it from flooding, it doesn't make a difference, right? You gotta have an oven to bake the pie. I mean, we've got the pie, we've got the oven to bake the pie. So we have the knowledge, we know what to do, we just need to we've identified, we have to do these projects to make sure we can have the protection and the management capabilities we need. And you see that there's several different alternatives because of the infrastructure. You see the little down there, the most left. There's a little piece cut out. That's a Texas Petroleum facility. So you see there's a levee all the way around it. There is gas lines and oil lines all around there. So what we've talked about is alternative 1, where we just bypass the facility, and alternative 2, we bypass it, but we take a little bit more into that property. That's probably more feasible than trying to work around all that old infrastructure when you talk about developing that process. And then the White Lake, the north shore of the White Lake, you see those 2 green lines, the prevailing southeast winds in the spring just beats up. And you can see the White Lake shoreline, the yellow in 1990, or the white in 1998, and how much it eroded into 2014. So when we talk about the White Lake shoreline, we're at $99 million. So when you add up the White Lake shoreline, the GIWW, the Unit 2 levee stuff that we need, you're looking at about $250 million that we need to invest in the property, so we can manage it appropriately. So with that, I'm going to move to Marsh Island. Marsh Island, everybody's familiar, it's just south of Sycamore Point, it's in Vermilion Bay. It was donated by the Russell Sage Foundation to the department. Obviously, the department has some parameters on what can and can't be done on the property, and we manage it appropriately like that. So a little background information, it was originally 76,000 acres, but it was donated in the early teens, right, 1900 teens. And so due to shoreline erosion, it is now, it's actually less than, it's about 68,000 acres right now. When you look at its brackish intermediate marsh, it's important for wintering, it's important habitat for wintering ducks and geese. It's important nursery grounds for critter crabs and other. And it was historically 5,000 years ago. It was a freshwater cycle swamp, right? But it separated from the mainland now to brackish marsh. So our management objectives are pretty much in line with White Lake. Is we want to improve the Marsh Island and winter waterfowl habitat, promote wildlife diversity, maintain densities of fur bears and alligators, and then provide recreational activities as well. And so our resource management that we do out there is much like White Lake. We have fish stress weirs, we have flat gate water control structures, we do marsh burning, we do habitat enhancement, and we do the data collection, monitoring, and resources. So this is a slide. Marsh Island has 10 water control structures on it currently. And when you talk about maintaining, if we had to replace those water control structures, you're looking at a cost from $3 million on the low side to probably $8 million on the high side for some of the bigger structures. So when you do that math, you had to replace all those, you're looking at $50 to $80 to $100 million. Historically, Marsh Island has had north of 45 structures on it because of the siding and the marsh kind of breaking apart and fragmenting, now we only have 10. So stop and think about that. When we first got this property, we had somewhere around 50 water control structures because the marsh was attacked. You had all those units you could manage it. Now we have 10 because it's so fragmented. And so that's why we need to address Marsh Island also. We have these marsh management units that those 10 impoundments service. Our best one is called the big impoundment. It's on the southwest side. It's protected. There's a oyster reef off the coast of the Gulf of America there, and then you have levees all the way around. So it's doing pretty good. But this eastern side, it's taking a pretty good hit. So where were we at? We made site visits with CPRA and Royal. We've looked at all the units. We've come up with a data gap analysis, survey and geotechnical investigating or to commit soon. We're actually issuing a special use permit this week so they can go out there and do the survey and geotechnical. And then the project planning document and we'll follow the data collections. So our highest priority is the east region, just talk about because of the marsh fragmentation, because of the shoreline erosion. And we're seeing that loss of oyster reefs on the eastern side that provides that natural protection that we need to do. The critical habitats are degraded and the ecological and economic benefits are diminished. So here's conceptually our critical needs. You see on the kind of the southeast corner down there, where you see the blue crosshatch, we're looking at survey that unit to do whether we look at marsh creation or marsh nourishment. Obviously, that's just an elevation difference, so we need to do the survey to see what qualifies, what the property qualifies for. We do the shoreline protection features, maybe rock off the shore there. We do shoreline protections, and then we do the reintroduction of oyster reefs on the eastern and southern timber to kind of help naturally, right, provide the habitat component and protect that shoreline. The data collection plan, we're going to do definitive, we're going to do magnetometer, and then we're going to do geotechnical. And so we're just waiting on the permit to begin this data collection. And I know I'm going fast, but we're going to cook some lunch. I don't want you to get hangry. And so with that, we talked about Marsh Island, we talked about White Lake. I'll briefly touch, I talked about those 51 other properties. Obviously, look, Edwards Island is a fisheries property, so I'm not going to talk about it. But Rockefeller, we have a bunch of restoration stuff. We have the Gulf of America shoreline protection projects that benefit the refuge. We have the completion of the ME35 North Shoreline. It's 3,200 feet, it costs $13 million, and that was approximately 5 miles of shoreline protection completed. We have the Southwest Coastal, ME41, is 6 miles of shoreline protection. That's being considered for the coastal plan. That's about 30 million. We have 30 million that's already obligated from Congress, and it'll be administered by the Army Corps and CPRA. And then we have the PBL 35 proposal, where we talk about the shoreline, Gulf West shoreline protection and engineering design, and that's valued somewhere almost $3 million. And then we have recent vegetation plantings along the beach of Rockefeller, where we planted 10,000 plants involving CRCL, some hydrogen, some LNG staff. So we got a lot of stuff going on Rockefeller also, and then we just started the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, Hermitage Inundation Relief Project a few months ago. That's $25 million, and that's currently under construction. So other efforts on our coastal donations and refuges. Working with St. Charles Parish on their master plan include features on Southwest and Tiffany and WMAs. We're working with CPR on Tetra Meeting 100 area design for state wildlife projects, state wildlife refuge projects. And then we're working on NGOs like Restore the Earth. I know we're going out with Polly next week to help do some plantings. We're offering some logistics assistance with some boats and some manpower. So we're always working with NGOs and our partners, to plant thousands of acres of wetlands. I think Restore the Earth was planted about 15,000 acres on the South Shore, Tiffany, and Marquardt WMAs with us. And then we're working with CPRA, and we're advising on the Deepwater Horizon Fund and Pasadena Hydro Reservation Project. And then we're obviously participating in the Atchafalaya Master Planning and broader coastal master planning efforts. And then state wildlife, that's a property that's on the west side of Marsh Island. It's adjacent to the Rainy complex with Hog. We're working on the Hog Bayou water control structure, and that's going to have some impacts to their property also. And so we'll be submitting that rental permit pretty quick. And then we have Raccoon Island restoration with the Deepwater Horizon efforts, North Shenandoah, North Harbor Island restoration, Passaluke Island restoration was talked about, and the Terrebonne Island Latifi project, ongoing construction. And then, we're playing a role in that. So, and we continue to do Queen Bess, monitor vegetation, and nesting birds, mating birds and nesting habitat. Rabbit Island, we're doing the same thing in North Breton. We assist the Fish and Wildlife Service on that, and obviously, everybody knows with the NOAA stuff, the Fish and Wildlife Service, their staffing is down, so we're helping them out where we can to manage those refuges. And with that, I know that was really quick, but I will entertain any questions.
Yes, Ms. Boyd.
Hi, Tommy. Nice to meet you. I wanted to call you Tony Tuna. I told Tony that. And then
You've been
you
the first
said
person to ever call me that.
you said you were Central Louisiana.
My
forestry guy.
I have a 10-year-old kid left, and she said, "It's your fault. I get called Manny Tuna in class every day."
But nice to meet you. I probably should know the answer to this, but I cannot remember. Why is the GIWW shoreline not cost shared?
So when that was constructed, the Corps says that their only responsibility is the shipping channel, so they continue to keep it open.
Like the main?
The main, so the GIWW was, I think, 135 feet wide when it was originally built.
Okay, so that's there.
It is now close to 300 feet wide.
Yeah.
So, when they built the GIWW, I think they signed the authority and responsibility for the maintenance of the shorelines over to the parishes and the local governments. So it falls back on property owners and the parishes and the local governments.
So you think there's no way to revisit that?
We have revisited that and we were told to go down and same.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Well, I don't appreciate it. I appreciate
No,
your
I don't
honesty.
appreciate
You're not-
it. It's difficult, right? But that's one of those things that somebody signed probably not knowing the effects. So when you look at that north shoreline along the White Lake and even some of the south shoreline of the GIWW, there's places where it's just a couple of feet wide. Now you stop and think about at some point, if it was 135 feet wide and it's now 300, well, that bank was 75, 80 feet further north and close 75 feet further south. So it has taken that wave action from that commercial side and just beaten it up over the years. So yeah, it's our biggest issue right now.
I appreciate that.
I got one brief one. Thank you, Mr. Alford, I appreciate that. So I think one of the most exciting things about Moore Hall Small in the Moore Hall conversion is the fact that it's going to impact almost entirely public land. That's, if I'm not mistaken, that's the biggest WMA in the state.
That's correct.
By acreage.
That is correct.
Is there been a level of coordination between wildlife fisheries and CPRA on some of the additional features that may need to come in the future, like some squirrel bank gapping and things like that, to the water to move a little bit better, maybe facilitate? I know that there's a boat launch, at St. James Boat Club, there's a boat launch feature that's associated with construction of the project, or some other launches in Livingston, but even to just maybe facilitate a little bit more access into some of those areas where the fish and wildlife habitat should improve.
Right, and so the issue is, our property, where our property boundaries are, there really isn't any public access. You have to almost get off at the boat club or the yacht club, and you've got to get off Reserve Canal to get into the management area. So we certainly have had those conversations with the parish, and we're talking, as we see how, if Davis Pond, I'm going to shift gears to Davis Pond, it's not even a land building project, it's a diversion project, right? But it's building land. And it's almost like the Chaffalot Delta. We actually pulled our staff off of Chaffalot Delta because it's creating land so fast. Anything I do or any public use feature I establish is almost dry, high and dry, or it's compromised. So we are working, that is on our radar, but we're kind of seeing where this goes and seeing what the results are before we go and spend a lot of money in establishing these public use features. But it is on our radar to improve. That's one of our strategic plans through the department that's been approved by the governor, is to improve access and provide more opportunity for the public. So it's always on our radar. And that's not, that's just traditional uses, but that's also non-consumptive uses also. So we are looking at kayak launches, a lot of this other stuff that may be coming down the pipe, that we can provide these public use features, but we need to kind of figure out how fast we're growing property, how much current can we do there in time frame, that way we can, the last thing we want to do is develop a boat launch in any way. So just gotta be smart about how we do it. So we're being cautious, but we're optimistic at the same time.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, let's go ahead.
So I'm looking on the Sunrise website for the wildlife management area for Marsh Island and then the oyster lease layer.
Yes, sir.
And it shows that where you were saying that you were building or working to keep the reef intact, that it's overlaid with privately held oyster leases.
I was actually talking about it.
Oh, on that side.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
So
so
on the east side.
y'all don't build any, you said, I thought you said southwest, I'm sorry.
No, no, southeast. So the
Southeast.
east side, so the
Okay.
south, I said the south, I didn't mention oyster reefs, but I said the big encampment that is right here.
Yeah.
That oyster reef provides a layer of natural protection to the shore there.
And y'all aren't spending public dollars on building a reef on the southwest?
No, sir. No, sir. Not at all.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any active industrial activity in the conservation area?
In White Lake, so Texas Petroleum does have, they get part of the oil and gas and mineral leases. So they are out there, it's nothing like it was 30 years ago. It's very, very minimal to say the least. In fact, I think that facility is probably fixing to be sold to another entity. The head of it will be.
I just was curious if that was another potential
So,
revenue source.
anecdotally, as part of their lease of the minerals there, they provide $200,000 of repairs to White Lake. So they do some levee lifting, some, but it's hard to quantify what $200,000 worth of work is, right? They just get a contractor. And then we do our best to identify some areas, but there's nothing in statute or any rule that says you have to go to where wildlife and fisheries prioritizes repair. A lot of times they just kind of, they do the repair themselves. And there's a lot of things wrong that we inherited, so a lot of challenges that we inherited when we got this property.
Yes, ma'am.
So is there, I see here, especially on the White Lake, it says, sustain wetland habitat and maintain these properties. Is there a time frame for this? Because even, I was just looking at the, with, action on the coastal master plan website, the land loss seems quite significant, but, the next 50 years. So I'm just wondering if there's a time frame for the maintenance plan.
Mr. Lede here still?
Yeah, right.
No, it's Lede.
Oh, no.
So I think, yeah, we'll have to plan. I'm sorry.
Not you,
Sorry.
Lede, you
My accent probably threw you off. I thought I said Mr. Lede. So I think CPRA has $29 million in this year's budget to start working on some of this shoreline protection. So that's why we've kind of prioritized it out. They do have 29. I think there's a plan to, like everybody else, to go after some of these surplus dollars that we may have there. So we should start seeing something very quickly. There is also the Intended Department to look for alternative funding measures so we can get some of this work done. So yeah, we're moving fast. Not as fast as I would like to move on the very, obviously I talk very fast on the very basic out of it. I'm hoping that we have some stuff going on by the end of this year. Certainly next year we'll have some stuff. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Tillman.
Thank you.
Very information. Thank you. All right. Moving on, coastal industry, and coastal jobs update. Scott, go back to you. Scott.
Right, well, thank y'all, appreciate Tony, the invitation to be here, Mr. Glenn. And for those of you I haven't met, Scott Kirkpatrick, I started working in this space in Governor Blanco's office back in 2004. So I've enjoyed working in this capacity, doing government relations work since that time. And here talking on behalf of the Coast Builders Coalition, which we started in 2008. And I think I'm also going to cover for the CCRE today. Peter couldn't be here. So I think if you're thinking about our advisory commission, part of what I understand you ought to be doing is working with different stakeholder groups. Think of this as both the group that is involved in direct coastal restoration, hurricane protection work through Coast Builders, but also indirect business involvement through CCRE. So that's kind of hopefully the two partners we're talking about here. CCRE, and we have, I know Ms. Joni Tuck is involved with this and has been, so she can fill in any gaps, but has been around since 2014, really focused or organized through Greater New Orleans Inc., and that's who Peter Wagner works with. And they have a group of over 35 companies who have been involved in promoting restoration and protection work, talking about these issues as it relates to businesses that, again, are kind of around this space, but not directly involved in doing the work. So, the mission, you'll see here, making that business case for the work that is happening, the benefits of the work, et cetera. Making sure that the business community understands the importance of their involvement in this work. I mean, I think we often operate in this coastal community can be a small community. At times it can be disheartening when you're, let's say, in the heart of Baton Rouge and talking to some folks and this seems very far from them. And you say, I mean, you're just a few minutes from this work. You're a few minutes from the coast. How is it that you are not engaged? And that can be true for even New Orleans, shockingly, when they're right on the legacy. This type of work is very important to get the message out to a broad group of stakeholders. I know that's part of what y'all are doing, and then the CCRE group is a part of what can help with that. Supporting adoption and implementation of the master plan, we've got a great history there, but of course that's not a given. These are obviously incredible trade-offs that are made as we put these plans together, and there can be friction on that. Ensuring going after additional dollars, I know the priority there and the importance for the future of this program to get that done. Advocating the maintenance existing of the new revenue. And then, creating opportunities to engage local businesses and the workforce in the master plan's implementation. So we've, both groups have been not only interested in making sure people see the projects. Again, that's part of our challenge is unlike transportation projects, people aren't necessarily driving on these things. They don't even necessarily see these projects. So you've got to find ways to help people appreciate what is happening, but also making sure that the workforce is going to be there and that the proper kind of education is there to get people ready to do this. So a part of what CCRE does certainly is trying to help folks understand who all is involved in this work, how important it is to the local economy. And so thankfully this is how the secret sauce is made as they use this in-plan system to try to estimate the impacts, the jobs, etc. And as you put all this in there, it shoots out all these wonderful numbers, right? And so what they've done here, Peter and his team, is, again, you'll see this is assuming implementation of the annual plan at $1.7 billion. They've got the direct jobs, right? So at 12,000, if you do $1.7 billion of work, they're estimating 12,000 jobs kind of sustained and engaged. But then you also have indirect and induced jobs, okay? So indirect are the jobs created basically by the project team spending money on things they need to do the work, right? Induced is kind of the secondary impacts of the people working on the projects, what they're spending in the local communities, right? So that total at the bottom, you see, almost 20,000 jobs related to full implementation of the annual plan. Now, just a side note here, I know Glenn was talking about, the annual plan is kind of an estimation of this is the spending authority we need, and I think so in the past, as we've kind of looked at, of the spending authority, how much actually goes out the door in any given year. That can vary, but 50 to half to 2/3 probably goes out the door in any given year. But I would still say these numbers are pretty darn accurate because this doesn't take into account what the Corps is doing, right, with their program. And the Corps, Captain Bob knows this, lately has had a very aggressive plan, almost $1 billion. Plus you have the locals, local levy districts, et cetera, that may be doing stuff outside the plan. So still very relevant numbers there. You'll see at the bottom kind of the breakdown of kind of what jobs, general job categories are involved here and kind of the numbers along with that. So that's pretty fantastic stuff that really speaks to incredible impact in the state. And then this is kind of the graphic and then I think CPRA often uses this at times as they go through their presentations, or the annual plan presentation. So that's CCRE. I'll pause there. Joni, did I miss anything?
No, as chair, I would like to commend you on your thoroughness and subject matter expertise. Great job.
Well, please pass that on to Peter. I got a nervous text from a few minutes ago that said, do you have any questions on my presentation?
Appreciate that question.
Very good, and so I think either that's going to get you to help me move it to mine.
Scott, while you're doing that, I got a question. You know, of the 12,400 jobs in the annual plan, 11,000 being construction, do we know how many are maybe affected by one particular large project that being mid-Fairbury, et cetera?
I mean, if it's a third of the plan, I gotta think it's a third of the jobs. I mean, I do know there are estimates specific to the diversion, and what that, those jobs would be. I don't have it in front of me, but back of the napkin, I'd say it's a third of the job.
It's a good guess, right? It's a lot more than sometimes we get from Get back to you on the number.
I can tell you that from the previous analysis that was done just a couple of years ago, it was about 3,500 jobs annually and spread out over 5 years. You add all that up, so that's the number of annual jobs that you're looking at.
Right.
So as I mentioned before, we put a nonprofit together back in 2008 to bring the industry together to advocate for restoration protection. Really, it was born out of the state saying, hey, we need, it was post-Katrina, we've got a lot of interest, we need help and advocacy, and if folks want to participate here, we need their help in coming alongside us and being advocates, and that's where Coast Builder started. I think in general, we're about growing funding and then spending it efficiently, right? Because this is, our members are those who are involved in doing the work. We're a little unique in that we're not just like an ACEC, just the engineers, or AGC contractors. We're anybody who's involved in this work, in this space. We're all trying to pull in the same direction and keep this program going. So I love kind of talking about this, and I've given this at the something similar at the CPRA board meeting. But if you look at kind of pre-Katrina, you were looking at about $100 million a year industry, right? That's just kind of what the state was spending, ROE Act, a little money here and there, locals, but it exploded post-Katrina, and we've been at about $1 billion clip plus since that time. So tremendous growth there. Of course, initially you had the levy work was heavy, right? It was, if you're in that industry, it was heavy on the levy work because that's where the $15 billion plus programs happened. Then, of course, you shifted to heavier with the restoration work because that was post-oil spill. And those dollars, more focused on restoration type stuff. So the industry has, shifted a bit, but in a lot of cases, most of these companies can do both, right? And in fact, that kind of comes from the diversity that they have from their work in the energy industry, right? A lot of these companies have worked offshore, they've worked on the coast, they can build levees, they all can also do restoration projects, and many of them are in the transportation space. So it's an interesting kind of ecosystem that you see, and it's good, right? And in a lot of ways, it keeps them flexible. So, I just mentioned this earlier, when we look at the annual plan, that's an important piece, but you also got to take into account the core spending, because that's also, pulling on resources. I know at times the state, or really always, the state in particular is always discussing with the Corps their dredging plans, because the Corps' got dredging needs, the state's got dredging needs. They don't want all the solicitations to come out at the same time, because then either you won't get bids or the bids you're going to get are so high. So there is some importance there to try to sync with the industry to make sure you're getting the right bids, the right costs, the right flow for that work. A couple of things, just we think about, hey, what are some of the benefits of working with the industry? How do we do this in a way that the industry is giving the state what it needs? And a couple of things through the years that we've faced. There was a time when, particularly with dredges, as the state looked at needing to increase its dredge capacity, it was not sure it could get there. And they came and said, "Look, I don't think there are enough dredges. We've got a lot of dredging work, and y'all aren't going to be able to do it." And the industry said, "You know what? If you show us consistent funding in the out years, we will make the investment in that equipment, right? But if it's haphazard, we don't know what's coming, that's going to impact our ability to invest." The state, thankfully the funding streams are consistent enough. The investments have been made. In fact, thankfully, a lot of those dredges were made in Louisiana shipyards, right, which is another awesome thing. And the industry largely has been able to respond to the needs of the state for dredging, which is very neat. Questions. Hey, do we have the workforce? Do we have do we have the master's program we need? At times, we didn't even know if there were enough at higher education institutions in Louisiana didn't even have some of the programs we needed for some of this. But again, they saw the future, they responded, made sure they had the majors and the masters they needed to kind of respond there. And so we do often talk to, whether it be community colleges or other higher ed institutions, to talk about, hey, what are you seeing? What are the workforce needs in the future? How do we take care of those? There have been questions about, hey, how do we efficiently procure this stuff, right? Everybody kind of came from the transportation model. How do you procure engineers? How do you best procure contractors? CMAR, that was alternative delivery methods. Is that something we need for the coast? Again, we've been in contact and working with the state to make sure that is efficient. And then, achievement is obviously working with the state on their annual plan and master plan, which is, I know, something y'all all do. It is amazing that the level of commitment and support for that plan. I know, as Representative Ogeron can say, it's not often you say, hey, we got $1 billion to spend and everybody's on the same page about how to spend it. That's pretty rare for legislature, right? And that's taken a lot of work from the people in this room. And it's we've enjoyed being a part of that team that supports that effort as we work through all this stuff. I will say too, in the industry, probably the number one thing you're looking at for your future investments is that annual plan and master plan, right? Those are the projects you're looking at. Do I hire this person coming out of LSU because I think we're going to get, some consulting work over the next 5 years? You're going to be looking at what's going to happen in the future to make that decision. We're going to invest, I mentioned, in a dredge because we feel like over the next 10 to 15 years, these projects are going to happen. That's why that annual plan and master plan are so important to everybody, including the industry. So, and I'd also say, we have been excited to see that we are exporting our knowledge to other places. These companies come, they're doing great projects, they're using that on their resume to win work in other places. And that's a bit of what we're here with about the Water Institute, trying to maximize what we do here, not only for our benefit, but then for those here to take that expertise to other places, ultimately benefit Louisiana. So that's been very exciting to see. And just one or two more slides here. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions. But, all right, so what are the challenges? I know y'all, this advisory commission, what are, how can we help? What are things y'all need to toss around? I mean, we all know funding is a particular challenge. And I think from the industry standpoint, it is interesting to think about how, this is rough, but that's just an 80-20 rule. If you're in the transportation space, you can count on about 80% of that funding being consistent each year because of the dedicated gas tax and vehicle sales tax, et cetera. About 20% can vary over time. That's surplus funding or capital outlay funding, et cetera. That 80% is your core. You pretty much flip that in the coastal space, right? If you look at the funding streams, pretty much are going to be there. It is only about 20% that you know. So from the industry standpoint, that is they're wary, something to be wary of, right? But also something to say, look, I tell my folks, you can't sit on the sideline. If you're enjoying the work that's coming out, you better help the state get more work and get the money for the work. Because it's, unless we have strong advocacy, unless you're promoting your projects to people in your community, they're not going to choose to fund them down the road, right? And so that's kind of a call to action. Again, look forward to, we always want to work with y'all on funding stuff and know that's a big piece of what this group is about. Workforce can be a challenge. Again, it's great that companies are involved in a number of different areas, right? But it can also mean if oil and gas ramps up, takes a lot of resources away, maybe you don't get as many bidders on the coastal side, right? Transportation ramps up, suddenly you're having trouble hiring people for certain things, Some of our dredging guys, they got, in particular, got to be on boats, got to have the right certifications for that. That can get tight. So it is an interesting challenge at times. It's just something you got to deal with, but that is, something we look out for. Opportunities to innovate. I mentioned this. I think we've had good success in a lot of ways with this, but it can be hard on the state to tee up innovation, right? I mean, I can remember, a lot of the experimenting with breakwaters and all that. And some company comes out, I think I got this good idea on these breakwaters. I can't get the state to spec this out. And from the state side, they say, well, I get it, but it's unproven. I don't want to spec something, it not work, and then they come back on me and say, you should have known. And so I do think there's a balance there. There's a certain approach you need to have to encourage that innovation in the right way. I think we all in this room recognize that we've got to have more innovation in order to be successful. We don't have all the money we need to address the problems that we have with this. And so y'all encouraging the state in the right ways on how to pilot things and innovate is going to be important. And in some ways, give them cover. I mean, if something doesn't quite work out, at times people got to step up and say, you know what, they made the best decision they could. Didn't quite work out, but we're going to learn from our mistakes too. That can be important. So the innovation piece is hopefully something in the future to continue to work on. And then obviously continue to work on exporting that expertise. How we do that, how we grow the economy here because we're experts at this, and allow our people to kind of go forth and do great things in other places. So those are some of the challenges. And look, that's about what I got. Any questions?
Very informative.
Yes.
I have one question. A comment and a question, actually. Just to speak about the differences in the industry and the workforce. For example, in Terrebonne and Lafourche, we have one contractor who started out as the maintenance contractor for the parish, who it was just $100,000 here and there, little projects that they would do, and now has been awarded the largest block complex project in their base of Thibodeau, Louisiana. So that's from a maintenance contract perspective of $1 million a year to almost $400 million block complex. But on the flip side of that, I'm having trouble hiring people to come work for me when there's jobs like that I'm competing against, right? So what can the Coast Builders Coalition do to maybe go to the community colleges, the technical colleges, and encourage earthwork and levee building and flood protection, because it's not something that's ever going to stop. It's never going to go away. We're always going to be working on levees, lifting levees, working on structures. It's a forever job. So that, I would like to know if you could speak about that.
Yeah, so we have entertained a variety of discussions with a lot of the community colleges at times as they're trying to tee up certain programs. Hey, if we do this program, where we're going to have people with jobs on the back end, and so often try to pair them with different companies that might be interested in that, and so they can share. Yes, we think we'll have some upcoming jobs in that space. I do think some of it too is just overall community appreciation for the work, right? And so people coming into the community colleges saying, hey, this seems like an exciting place to be. But probably the best thing we can do is to stay close to the community colleges. I know we've been down by y'all, and happy to field any other questions that they haven't, and say, hey, can we talk to some people in the industry? We have some people in this, we have some graduates or some students in this space, and want them to understand what the opportunities may be. That's probably the best thing we could do to help.
Thank you.
You know, Angela can testify, talk about innovation. You know, of course, sector gates are wonderful, and easy to operate. Everything is great though, right? We love to have them. We have 13 barge gates. We had the option of not having gates or putting in barge gates for about 1/5 of the cost. And they are a pain in the, you know what, to operate, to open and close. But our option was to either not have them or have a little bit of innovation and design barge gates, and they work great. You just have to have quite a few people to operate them, open and close them before and after the storm, you know? So, any other questions for Scott? Yes, sir.
That 80/20, 20/80 thing was interesting, and I won't poke on it too much, but that sounds almost exactly right past 2032 in terms of funding streams that currently exist. But it seems like right now it would be more around 80/20 in terms of the money that's fairly well.
Right. I mean, I'm putting the kind of the BP stuff as not consistent.
Okay.
Hopefully the Bro Act, hopefully, Bill Mason should stick around.
Yeah, but it's still, that adds up to about 20% of what.
So, okay, but if you're in the industry, right, so we got whatever 2031, 2032, the money runs out. But the state's pretty much gonna have programmed out all of the projects in the next few years. They're pretty much gonna be able to tell the industry, these are the projects we got. Now, it's gonna take, 5+ years to, get the money out to y'all. But beyond that, they're gonna tell the industry that all these other projects, at this point, we don't know how they get the funding. So it's gonna be an interesting dynamic, right? The 2029 master plan is gonna be fascinating in how the state approaches that, and what message it sends to the industry about, how things go forward. Even though it's 2029, that 29 master plan, you're gonna know where the money's going.
Related to that, Scott, I know you guys have, been part of that Shores Coalition that's been advocating for the RISE Act. Didn't ultimately pass last Congress. Some talk about it this Congress. Are you following as a coalition where that legislation may be, and absent of it potentially passing in this Congress? What are the other options there to secure some more long-term funding?
Yeah. Well, look, I don't know that I have any extra insight. Neil does a great job getting the best Neil McMillan, the best updates. I think it's kind of seemed like a bit of a black hole now as leadership kind of churns on. But I'm so hopeful because it is a time that could happen, and if it doesn't, Chris, we'll still be plugging away. But I think what's interesting for this group, not to be negative, but you know, that for some time, that has been our main source of additional funding. It's a very important source. We need to be successful. But this group's also got to wrestle with that. Even if you get that, that's only a portion of what we need to maintain the $1 billion a year. And you know, at this point, the amount of funding coming at the state or local level is relatively small. And so, you know, where do we go? Right, and that's not a today question, but it is tomorrow. I kind of need it, and this group could maybe help in that consideration.
Thank you.
Okay. Scott, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, and moving on, we have 2 speaker cards. This is the Dave, hypoxia situation. Yeah, Mr. Dave. He might have left. We're going on. All right. And Polly Glover. Restore Retreat. All right.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm going to be real brief in my comments because I know everybody's hungry and they want to get a lunch, right? But first, real quick, it's been referenced twice. Next week, we do have a planting in Port Fourchon. It's coming up. It's the Ducks Unlimited terracing project, just over the commission of land. It's 87,000 feet of earthen terraces, okay? Roar's, part of that was to secure funding for 16,000 black mangroves. Again, if you want to join us, you're welcome to come out there and plant. It's been a great collaborative effort with the support of Wildlife and Fisheries, Jefferson Parish government. We've got some assistance coming in from Terrebonne as well. So it's an incredible project. Volunteers are going to plant it. But I really came here to address some of the concerns about Dipteroteria. There's a lot of talk about, the science and the operations of the project, but, the other so-called elephant in the room, which really needs to be addressed, is Mid-Barataria not going through doesn't just impact the residents of Plaquemines Parish. It's going to have, impacts across, really impacting everything south of the I-10 without those wetlands there. I think most of us that have been working on advocating for it, some of y'all, Steve, so some of y'all certainly doing it longer than I have, will note that the science is solid. It's 40 years of solid science. Imagine if we would have built that diversion 40 years ago, we would not be here today having that discussion. But I think perhaps the biggest, and I'm not going to read the scripted notes that I have. I made a comment 2 years ago when the Washington Post came to Louisiana to film a study, a story called Facing the Surge. Steve, I think you may have been in that with me. I don't recall at this point. But the reporter, who happened to be globally known for covering environmental reporting, was struggling with the notion that we had levied the river in the 1930s and that the estuary was deprived of the sediment. So what I did was I pulled over on the side of the road in Plaquemines Parish and I said, imagine that you have just taken your artery and put a tourniquet on it and constricted your blood for the rest of your body, which is basically, and then all of a sudden the reporter said, now I'm starting to understand. We really and truly only got one shot to get this right. It's funded, it's been properly vetted, it's permitted, the engineering is solid, the design is solid. I guess my biggest concern is that future generations are going to suffer at the hands of this project not going forward. And the media is saying different things. It's stalled, it's killed, which is it? I just want to go on the record that I was on the phone till 11 o'clock last night with members of the community that were upset that this project is being stalled or killed for the benefit of just a few people. Because the overwhelming support is for this project to go through as implemented. That's it.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, motion adjourned.
Second.
Motion, Caluso, second. Mr. Bob. No objection. We are adjourned.